Hey, Ed.
What's good, John?
Hey, man, I'm well. I'm well. This is All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. And we are here for the fifth Friday of the month, and we have a good show planned.
Right.
Yep, we are shortly going to get started with having some more council candidates on. So that are going to start shortly. But Ed, tell me what's been going on this week. What's on your mind? What is what is? Oh, also we're going to have some really good things in the rest of the show as well. We're going to have we're going to have.
Well, I'm sorry, John. You know what people always say? They always say we don't introduce ourselves.
Oh, true. Well, my name is Jonathan Alston. I am one of the co-hosts of All Politics Are Local, and hey, that's who I am. So hey,
And of
that's
course,
me.
I'm Ed Riley. I'm also one of your co-hosts, and along with John Olson.
Well,
And we've got some other co-hosts that just aren't here just yet.
right, but Ed, being a little humble, he created the show over like 12
Uh,
years ago, right? Like, and so doing it every week, loyal and faithful, about 12 years,
yeah.
trying to promote civic discourse in the community, and to that end, in the 7 o'clock hour, we're going to be introducing some council people for Newark's West Ward. And we always believe in civic discourse. It's really important to make sure that we hear from all the candidates who are running to get their message out. And it's really important for that to happen. The first person who we're going to have is Dupre Kelly. He's coming on, and he's he's running for the council person for the West Ward. We will have a few other council candidates for council later in the hour. At 7 o'clock, we're going to have Insha Rahman and of the Vera Institute and Joe Johnson of the ACLU, and they're going to be talking about bail reform. And we're at 7:45. We're going to have Larry Hamm on, and he's going to be talking about the Gary Convention. He was the youngest delegate in the Gary Convention in 1972 when it happened, and I just had the honor of hearing one of the best speeches I've heard in a long time there. So and of course,
So you went up to City Hall today?
yep, was up there today,
You
and
gave
so
him those wristbands.
yep, all that. I had one here with me, so
Okay.
they're all good as well. So, and of course at 8:30 is the State of Hip Hop with DJ Rhino. He'll be coming on. So we're going to jump right into it, actually. So we have our first candidate. Hey, how are you? Can you hear me? I think you're having some. I think we're having some technical difficulties with the. So yeah, so it happens a lot. So people just go out and come back in. But so the council races in Newark are actually really exciting. There are a lot of people who are running, a lot of good people who are running, and one of the things that we want is to make sure that everyone can be heard and have a say. So
Right.
that's going to happen tonight. Because we've been doing the different council races. I think we interviewed everyone who was running in the South Ward, everyone who's running in the Central Ward of Newark. We have interviewed a few of the candidates from the East Ward, and we're going to try to interview all the candidates from the West Ward as well. These are 15-minute interviews, and they're a chance to get to know your candidate, who they are, and yes, he is back. Hey man, welcome.
What's up? What's up, Jonathan? How you doing? Ed, what's happening?
What's good, Councilman?
And
Man,
running for councilman, right? So hey man, how are you?
I am just working, man. I'm out here working. I'm good though. I'm good. Just out here pounding the pavement. I'm sitting in the car right now. Just coming off of interviews. We have the unions out here helping us canvass today, so I would definitely want to shout out local Union 3 and all the good brothers and sisters in the union that is helping us knock on these doors. We're rising over about 40,000 doors knocked on. It's been a great season.
Oh, that's great. So we're gonna jump right into it. You were on our show before. We had the honor of interviewing you when you first started running, and so the first question that we're going to ask you is a question that we're asking all the candidates, right? And that is to let us know about based on, we asked you before about your biography and what is there about your background that makes you the best council candidate. Has that changed in terms of what you think about what you bring to it based on your campaigning, right? So talk to me. What is there about your biography that make you the best council candidate? And has that story shifted or changed as you've been running in the last few months?
Well, I'm the best candidate because of the city that we're in. And what I mean by that is that Newark is a city that we can't just have a sitting councilman that's just doing legislation. They have to be amongst the people. They have to be engaged with the community. They have to be able to talk to the residents and talk to the business owners and all of those guys. You know, my track record shows that that I am the candidate with the most experience in the community. I have a nonprofit organization called 211 Community Impact, which you both know of, and we've done numerous things in our community. And, you know, from feeding homeless to housing homeless to helping battered women, to starting women initiatives, to getting lift bus for our special needs schools. And we got one lift bus for JFK, which is in the West Ward on South 10th Street. But because of our efforts of doing that, we forced NPS to match that and get another lift bus for our other region, our other special needs school, Regional Day. So we do things like that. But what I've noticed about that is that though that community work is a gap filler, that community work is like almost like a Band-Aid. And I think when you ask, has things changed? Yes, it's the understanding of doing the work, encountering people, engaging with and meeting them where they are, seeing the needs that we need now. And what I've learned is that you need political power to foster change, systemic change. You know, you need that power to be able to have an effect on the educational system with curriculums, and you need that power to be able to foster change with our public safety, fire, and police. You need that power when you're talking about fostering change with economic development, not just from an advocate standpoint, but actually as a change maker, and that happens with you know, that happens with ordinances and things of that nature. You know, that's where it happens at. So I've learned that. So when you talked about has things changed, the work hasn't changed, meaning that the only thing that's changed with the work is that there's been more. We have stopped. You know, this thing that I do in the community, I don't do the work because I have to. I do the work because I have to. You know, and if I have resources and relationships that I can bring to the table, just like my nonprofit organization, that's what I've been doing. So I haven't stopped doing the work. I continue to do the work. And, you know, the more you do, the more experiences you get, the more things you learn, the more people you encounter, the more people you engage. You know, when you meet people where they are, when you meet people when you are closest to the people in pain, you know, those are the people who should make, you know, ordinances and legislation. You know, those are the people who can help the people that are in pain, the people who are close to the people in pain. And I've been close to the pain. You know, I haven't left my community. I haven't moved to another community. I haven't, you know, I've been here right with the people. So as Mayor Baraka would say, man, Dupre, you didn't take the escalator or the elevator, but you took the stairs. You know, and those stairs have muscles that I didn't even know I had. And it just prepared me, man. Everything that we do every day for our community has been preparing me to continue to push this city forward. And it's going to be an honor to govern where I grew. You know, on May 10th, 2022, you know, I asked for the people's support for the work that I've already been doing, in the community. And it will be an honor, you know, it's going to be an honor. I'm claiming now it's going to be an honor to govern where I grew, man. That's the West Ward of Newark, New Jersey.
All right, so the West Ward always also means a lot to me. Like I grew up in the West Ward as well. I grew up on, and I told you before, I grew up on West End Avenue, right off of South Orange Avenue, so the ward always meant a lot to me.
Yep.
Still means a lot to me, right? So, but when we're talking about some of the issues that are plaguing the South Ward, the most common one people talk about is crime, right? Like, or it's one of the ones. There are two, but the first one is usually about crime. And one of the things we that, or at least that the debate, we need to deal with issues of crime, but you don't want to over police. You don't want to make sure that people are not used by police, right? So, what is your vision? Oh, we just lost him. I guess it's funny because as a teacher, we're always losing people inside of like Zoom calls, etc. So that's very common.
What's up, Zaid?
Hey, everybody. I apologize for struggling to get on late. I was having some connect issues myself.
Yeah.
And
by the way,
y'all getting ready to work due. Let's hope he gets back on.
All right.
There he is. There we go.
All right. So given that, what is your vision?
It's real choppy.
Can you hear me now?
I don't think he can hear. Can you hear us?
It's a little choppy. Let me see if I can.
Mic check 1 2 1 2 1 2. How's that?
It's a little choppy, but
Maybe
go back. Go back out. Come back in.
Well, and come back in. Right, and you might just be in a spot that just gets a certain way. So if you go back and come back in, we'll continue.
I just came out. I just went out and came back in. You want me to do it again? I just went out and came back in. You want me to do it again?
Yeah, because you didn't actually come out on our end. All right, so that usually works. Sometimes there are a lot of dead zones in London places.
Before you come back, Zaid, people say we don't introduce ourselves. Would you introduce yourself, please? Zaid is one of our co-hosts too, so introduce yourself. I had John introduce myself. Why can't y'all introduce yourselves?
You reintroduce yourself. Yes.
Let me reintroduce myself. I am myself.
So let me have to introduce you.
Friday, it's another edition of All Politics of Local America's number one hip hop talk radio show. We're getting some of our candidates ready for what they're trying to do on May 10th. Elections matter.
Absolutely. All right, so this seems like it's going to work. It's better connection.
Yeah, it seems like.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, sir. You hear me? I hear you. Yep.
All right.
So, what is your vision of what crime looks like in the West Ward, and what is your vision of how to deal with it, how to lower it, how we should address it?
I think that any crime that is happening is too much. We have a lot of stolen cars right now. The stolen cars are leading to the other crimes as well. So the crime that is happening is when a car is stolen, it's most likely to have more crime that's attached to it, and robbery, to shootings, and all of these things. So the crime right now, my vision is that we get more police presence, right? But not just, we do community policing as well. I put out a revitalization plan where I'm talking about putting the public back in public safety, about having meetings with our top cops, with our chief of police and our captains, community meetings with stakeholders, so that we can do community policing as well. So the Office of Violence and Prevention with Keisha Uri, we have social workers now that are graduated with the police officers that has been helping. They go out with the police officers that they're called upon, but that's not just going to be it. We need programming from our police officers, from our police and our community to come together so that we can create opportunities for the people who are out there doing these crimes. It's a lot of young men that are doing crimes, from young children to young youth to young adults. And I believe that when we create programming, when we create initiatives for them to get involved in, that will also lessen the crimes more police presence and more community policing. You know, the deterrent is a great thing, but programming is more what's going to stop a lot of the crime, because it changes the mentality. You know, coming up in this neighborhood, I was involved in programs such as TNT. I was involved with the David Wright Association. I was involved with Ron Howard. And these programs actually saved my life. You don't know it when you're going through the processes, but because you don't have time to get involved or entangled with things, the negativity that are going on in the street, you know, you have more time to get involved in these programs. And there's a lot of things that exist in our recreation programs that we need to take more aware of, so that we can get some of these people off of the corners. And also, in my plan too, I want to bring in more educational meetings. When I mean educational meetings, is bringing some of our youth into financial literacy meetings, teaching them how to identify what opportunities look like, teach them how to use transferable skill sets, that something that they already have inside of them, you know, that they already have inside of them, that they can utilize to make their economy grow. They can create businesses, how to start businesses. I just started a program partnering with Phillip College for women entrepreneurs in the West Ward. I'm also starting a program with the Masons that actually, who are lawyers. Some of them are lawyers, some of them are doctors, and they're going to come in and talk about financial literacy with our young men. And it's about creating new opportunities for them, so that they can understand that they don't have to go into the negative economic of our community, from drug selling to selling stolen vehicles to doing anything illegal. We give them the opportunity to be the great people that they are. The people that I speak to out here on these corners, they don't want to be negative. They don't want to be doing anything that's illegal. They want to actually live a decent life. But you'll be surprised of the people who don't know how to go about that. And that's what we're trying to show them, and that we will show them. You know, we will create different opportunities for them and teach them how to take advantage of some of the opportunities that already exist.
Zaid, all right. Do you have a follow-up question on the issue of how to deal with issues of crime in the West Ward?
So for me, as you know, dude, peace, my brother. So, you know, policing is really.
How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. So, you know, policing is really just one part of, obviously controlling violence in our community. You know, so that works on one level, you know, particularly with us. On the other level, man, it's got to be about more than just policing, right? It's got to be about, you know, creating opportunities around jobs. You know, I was having a conversation this morning with some cats on a construction site, and he was saying, he was saying, hey, man, you know, I'm one of the only young brothers on this site, but 90%. If not 99% of the people that are on the site are not young black men. And he was saying that, you know, what would help around violence, particularly in our city, he said, man, if there were more opportunities like on construction site, he was talking about like, down in the Portuguese sections, they actually have an office where they actually train their young people how to be carpenters, how to be bricklay masons and welders and painters, and we don't really necessarily have those offices in the community. What do you think about creating something like that in the West Ward for young men?
Well, I maybe you didn't. Maybe the phone was breaking up, Ed, but maybe you didn't hear me. But that's exactly what I'm doing. When I say create opportunity, I'm not speaking about fear. I'm talking about something that I have already done. So even before I was running for office with 211 Community Impact, we partnered with Jen Goley. Jen Goley built our switching station. Jen Goley also built Don Tech, Don Payne Tech. And in those programs, I was able to get people from the West Ward, young men from the West Ward, to actually be on those sites. Those sites, they had to take 60 hours worth of training. After they took those 60 hours worth of training, they were able to work on the sites. They were able to make money and have opportunities that they never had before. So I'm talking about from experience of what I've done already, and put these young men on sites, and it changed the world. They're homeowners now. They own vehicles now. Some even bought motorcycles, even though some of the contractors suggested that they don't. But so I had a great conversation with the union, Local 3. And maybe you missed this one, maybe because the phone was breaking up. But Local 3, they're out helping me canvas right now. So my question, my sit down with Local 3 was, how about you guys coming to our neighborhoods? If I can gather and galvanize some of our young men and give them this training. They said yes, they have to be willing to take the training. The training happens down in South Jersey, sometime in Trenton, New Jersey. It's 60 hours. Once you train 60 hours, you have the opportunity to take any other training that the Local 3 has to offer. And with this 60 hours of training, you will come in making about $60 an hour. $60 an hour, and then it can go up. It can gradually go up as you get more experience under your belt. And this is amazing, because we get an opportunity, we get the chance to create opportunity for people who wouldn't have these opportunities before. So I had a conversation with some young men on the corner, and I asked them, how much money do you make an hour? One guy said, oh, dude, I make $100 an hour. And I know these corners. So I said to him, and then after you pay your boss, how much do you make then? And he's like, what do you mean, my boss? And I said, well, we all know if you make $100 an hour, you got to pay your supplier. So your suppliers, now you're down to 50 probably, right? Then I asked him, do you have any children? Oh, yeah, I got a daughter. I take care of my daughter. All right, then that's another 20 off of that. And then you got to pay her mother. And by the end of the day, it was down to like $15, $20 an hour. I said, with that amount, you might as well get a regular job. I'm out here 24 hours a day. Okay, all I need is 60 hours from you. 60 hours to train, and it can change your life. You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. Your family doesn't have to worry about you coming home. You don't have to worry about the police, all the opposition out there. So it's an opportunity, and I was talking to about a group of 10 of them on a corner. But after talking to them, I saw that 2 or 3 of them asked for my number and wanted to keep in touch. And that's just the amount that I sent to Jingoli before. I sent them 3 people. Those 3 people are now homeowners. Those 3 people now have vehicles. Those 3 people go on vacation. And that's my experience by not running for office, just doing it through my nonprofit, by changing the life of 3 people with the help of Jingoli, by just putting them into a training session. And now from that experience, I have Local 3 Union coming here to say, you know what, we'll give whoever you bring to the table, we'll give them that same opportunity. So that's what it's about. It's not just about policing. That's a deterrent, in some cases, and it shows that the crime goes down, but that's all it is. If we don't create opportunities, we don't create programming, we don't change the mindset, crime is going to always exist anyway, but we have to lower it with changing the mindset of the people. When I talk about revitalization, I'm the only candidate that created a revitalization plan, who came with a plan, and not just saying it, but has it documented. And on my plan, the foundation for my plan is my ideas, but it's using all of the ideas of the people that I've spoken with in the community, all the ideas of people I engaged with, had encounters with, and it's still just the foundation and the base for the community.
Oh man, he was on the roll.
Yeah, but we're just getting ready to ask him the next question
but he's right though, Zaid. I think that one of the greatest deterrents is being able to provide opportunity for young men. Right? I mean, I know that changed my life. Right in the city of Newark. I mean, had not it been for the gym,
And remember, where I think he's actually about to get back on. I think he's about to get back on now. Is everything good? Can you hear us?
Yeah,
You was on a
I
roll.
know it's the sectioning up because I'm in the car. But just to continue what I was saying is, we as elected officials.
Mr. Kelly, we are running a little bit out of time, but what I want to do is get to that next question before we run out, right? Like, and that's the next issue that people have been talking about in the West Ward is garbage. They've been talking about garbage, litter, lots, right? Like, what is your vision for that? Do you think that it has gotten worse? Is it the same? Is it just something that was neglected that needs to be dealt with? How would you deal with garbage? And I don't mean garbage on the streets, garbage in certain houses, like certain properties. Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, I've already had meetings with I've already spoke to the director of DPW to talk about these concerns. And once again, I'm talking to the directors, coming to them with the concerns of people. There's a video that somebody sent me the other day of me jumping out on South 9th Street in Newark, New Jersey, jumping out in the West Ward on South 9th Street, chasing down a garbage truck. And I didn't know anybody was taping me. The reason why I jumped out is because they threw the garbage into the truck. And that truck, you know, as it turns and it takes the garbage and dumps it into, I guess, the pool of the truck, you know, the trunk of the truck, spit out.
We lost your volume.
Lost you again.
Yeah, you may have
There we go.
Lost the volume again.
So it's the bag, and it spit out some of the garbage. It spit out the garbage onto the street.
Mr. Kelly, we're actually losing you again. So if you go out and come back, that time we should be able to get you.
Every time we get on the road, Zaid, we lose him.
Yeah,
right?
Yep.
Chasing
Absolutely.
down the garbage truck to get making the mess instead of cleaning it up.
Yeah, exactly, man. I've seen that, and that's don't they have guys who's supposed to be riding on the back of that to see that stuff?
Yeah.
Sometimes I guess all garbage men aren't created equal. Some are more diligent about what they do, and some are more sloppy about what they do. You know, the drivers keep right on going.
Right.
They're on the clock. They that.
Right.
The men doing that jumping
Exactly.
off.
Those
And
guys
whatnot, they got to get it right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Not just leave garbage all over the street.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that is a hot issue in the West Ward, though.
I can imagine.
It was garbage. It's like there's trash. There's and so that's been a strong issue, right? Like, so I'm getting ready to get the either get Dubac and get the next candidate in. Oh, and I think he is back right now.
I apologize, man. I don't know what's going on with this.
All right, so you were talking. What we had is that you chased down a garbage truck, and that's where it ended. It was like
I literally chased down a garbage truck on 9th Street, and I didn't know somebody taped it. And they sent me the video the other day and said, "Great job." And I didn't think it was a great job. I thought I was just really being a concerned West Ward citizen. And the garbage popped out. So my point is that I witnessed these things so I can address them from an experience level. And I talked to the garbage truck guys. I think that when I spoke to the director of DPW, it's about talking about care and concern, because sometimes people are just doing their job. And with DPW, you can't just do your job as a garbage man. And doing your job is throwing the bags, throwing the containers into the truck. We have to make sure that we do that with care. There has to be some type of protocol that is initiated and some type of concern and care from the workers, because you can't just do it nonchalantly because you leave things behind. You're not doing it You're not doing it properly. You're not doing it the way that you're supposed to be doing it. And it's not to bash or say that everybody from DPW is doing that. But when you hear a certain complaint, I think I told the residents is, when you know that your garbage is being picked up, everybody has a camera phone. Take a video, take a picture. We know who are on those routes. We know who is picking up the garbage during that time. Send an email to the director. Send it to my office. Send it to my campaign office, so I can deal with the director and talk about what's going on, so we can pinpoint who is doing the job, who is not doing the job correctly, how they're doing the job. And I think that if we approach it right from where the problem starts, we can fix a lot of that, because a lot of that is just of them not caring. From what I witnessed myself was, them throwing the garbage bag in, some of the stuff bouncing back out, and them not going back to pick it up until I confronted them and made them pick it up. But we can't have somebody out there every day just watching them. So we have to turn the community. We have to turn the community into our eyes, ears, and mouthpieces. And that's the way that it's gonna, get better, by starting block associations again, or reactivating people who care on the block. When you love your city, you can change your city. You can have an effectiveness on your city. But if you don't say anything, if you drive past it, if you drive over the garbage that was spilled out there, if you don't say anything, then nothing will happen.
Okay, so we're going to get to that last question, and the last question is going to be is always a fun question for you, and that is I was going to ask you, right? Who's your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group? This is the question.
That's easy one for this guy.
Right?
That's easy. Lords of the Underground.
But I'm not going to ask you.
We need to give him the jazz.
I'm not going to ask you that question, right? But I am going to ask you the question of who you're rocking with, like what song, what artist, like what music, what particular songs, what particular vibe are you rocking with now, and or what actually embodies what you think of your campaign, right?
I don't even know if that's a fair question for Dude. I think we should ask him. We should ask him what new young artist is really moving it right now.
Fair. We could ask them all those, because we have about a minute. We got about a minute. But
okay.
We a little bit with that. So
forever in my life, it's always Lords of the Underground. I'm always rocking with Lords of the Underground. We're going to continue to be the Funky Children. We're going to continue to be the Chief Rockers. We're going to continue to yell, "Here come the Lords." But if I can include my own group, Lords of the Underground, I'm going to go with Rakim as my all-time classic, my all-time favorite. I just like the way that his clarity of his lyrics and his words, and the comprehension of it, was just so direct for me. My new favorite artist right now, I think I just bought 10 of his albums off of his website, is RJ Payne. I love RJ Payne. If you're not hip to RJ Payne, check him out. I just think he's a solid MC. I think he's very crafty with his words, and if I had to pick anybody that was even younger than RJ Payne, I'm not mad at Little Baby. I think, and I'll tell you why. I think that as an MC, and speaking from being an MC, when you're an MC in hip hop, you talk about the things in the culture around you. You're narrating the culture as an MC. So I think that listening to Little Baby, how he started narrating the culture through his mixtapes, and I feel like I see him growing. I see him start to say more, speak of more relative things that are happening in society, in his neighborhood, and he's starting to be a little more conscious. So I think that in another 5 years, we might get a different Little Baby. It's almost like listening to me and Lords of the Underground as a young adult, as a teenager, and listening to me as a grown man now with my album Bring the Sun, that it features the mayor on Keep the Faith. And that album's called Bring the Sun. So right now it's RJ Payne and Little Baby and my album, man. Bring the Sun. Check that out. I think it's the most personal I've ever been on any piece of art. And it's coming from a standpoint of right now, where I am in my life as an MC and as just a black male who still lives the hip hop culture.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I know you're working hard, and good luck. Good luck in the campaign, man.
Thank you, and Zaid, salute to you, man. Ed, you already know, and John, man, you already know. I think you're one of the dopest, question ask interviewers and debaters. And I don't think anybody can mess with your debate teams in the state of New Jersey. So I salute you, and I thank you guys,
salute,
man. One of my favorite shows, man.
All right, good luck to you, beloved.
True.
Well, thank you, and good luck.
Peace.
Peace.
All right, cool. So the West Ward race is a heated race, and we're going to have two of the other candidates on tonight. We're going to have Lyndon Brown, who's running for West Ward Council, on right now. He's backstage. We're going to bring him in, and we're going to get started. Because remember, we're all about, like, we think that these elections are important. We think all of these elections are important, and our goal is to get everyone right to have civic discourse, because the people deserve it. Right? The people deserve to hear from everybody. They deserve to hear what the ideas are so that they can make their choice. So welcome, Lyndon Brown.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Appreciate you coming, man. Appreciate you coming on. So we're gonna jump right into it. And the first question we're gonna ask is, what is there about your background or biography that makes you the best candidate for West Ward councilperson?
Well, as I've stated, early on, I am the candidate with a proven record of service, with the most experience, with the most consistent work in the community. I've been a district leader for 30 years. I've been a block association president for 40 years. In the community, I've served as president of the elementary parent council for the West Ward, and president of the PTA for Essex County, 490 schools. I served as president of the 4th Bureau Community Precinct Council, meeting with the captain of the precinct every month. I feed the homeless through my nonprofit organization. I've helped over 6,000 students in their pursuit of higher education through free SAT classes, financial aid workshops, college fairs. I'm at every school board meeting. As you know, Jonathan, I'm constantly advocating for residents. I am helping residents who are experiencing food insecurity, unemployment, helping them with jobs, resume assistance. I'm at every football, basketball game. I'm at the Hispanic Day Parade. I'm at the breast cancer walks. I'm in the community. I'm entrenched. I'm the neighbor that residents call, especially elderly, when they need someone to change their light bulb or synchronize their clocks, doing daylight savings time. I'm the person that people call when they need a ride to the airport to and from at night. I'm the person that people call when they are experiencing foreclosure, when they are having domestic situations in their home, and they need someone to kind of, bridge the gap between, children and parents, or parents and kids. I'm that missing link in a lot of families and in the community.
All right, thank you. Like I think we met at many of the board meetings a long time ago, under Cami, when Cami Anderson was there. Now, the second question is looking at when the first big issue in the West Ward that people were talking about is not surprising, crime, right? I was actually driving down South Orange Avenue and the middle of the day, and there was a car that was actually doing a donut on South Orange Avenue in the middle of the day. What is your perception of crime in the West Ward, and what policies would you advocate to deal with it? We always are really hesitant about over policing. We're always, but at the same time, we have kids or people, right? I might have been a grown man doing donuts in the middle of South Orange Avenue.
Well, crime is rampant in the West Ward. I have to admit that. I've been a victim of violent crime. I've been carjacked and beaten unconscious. I've had a home invasion, which just robbed 2 weeks ago of my cell phone in the West Ward. And so I know that the importance of community safety and the public safety. I believe that because South Orange Avenue, Roseville, Orange Street, we have a lot of county roads that run through the West Ward. And I think that the county needs to step it up with the sheriff's department, because I do believe that the Newark Police Department is overwhelmed, and I do think that we need stronger legislation when it comes to juvenile offenders. I think that the bail reform has had an adverse impact on the community, and I think, you know, because so many police officers are out here arresting individuals and then they're back on the street the same day, it causes a fear in the minds and hearts of the victims and of those who are witnesses to the crimes. They feel like, why should I testify against this person when they were back on the street the same day? I think it's important that the data that is never shared with the community is shared. When I was president of the precinct council, the captain met with us monthly, and he let us know where the crimes were occurring, what levels of crime were occurring in the West Ward. And we missed that. I think the data needs to be shared with the community, not just with the council person, but with the community at large. I think we need a task force to deal with some of the problems that are plaguing the community, which includes unemployment, which includes a lack of recreational opportunities for our youth in the community. All that, you know, is are contributing factors to the crime that's occurring in the West Ward.
I have a follow-up question, but I think my follow-up question might be the same as Zaid's follow-up question. You said that bail reform is having an adverse effect. We actually have two people talking about bail reform who are going to be coming on later in the program. They're going to be coming on at 7. One from the ACLU, one from the Vera Institute. Can you talk to us about what you think about the problem with bail reform is in the West Ward in terms of crime? Can you just explicate that?
I think there's increasing level of recidivism with the criminals who are committing these crimes. I don't think there's enough interventions. I don't think there's enough reform occurring, you know, inside of the prisons. I think, you know, we really need to look at, you know, counseling. We need to look at trauma-informed care. Some of the criminals who are committing these offenses have some deep-rooted problems that have been, you know, perpetuating, you know, for years, you know, probably even with some of them at the elementary school level. I've actually been familiar with a lot of the criminals in the community, and a lot of the behavior that they exhibited as adults, I saw signs of it at the elementary school level, at the middle school level. And I saw them increasingly becoming involved in more serious crimes, and there was no interventions for them, no psychiatrists, no social workers in the community. A lot of people look at therapy as, you know, a negative thing, but it's not. I think we need to have more counseling going on, especially at the county level, where juvenile offenders are placed. I think we need to have a more community service. I think we need to have more mentoring in the community. I think, you know, when you look at the crimes and you look at, you know, the judges who are sentencing a lot of these criminals, I think a lot of them feel that, you know, it's a no-win situation, that if we put them here, the jails are going to be overcrowded and that sort of thing. But the victims are the ones whose plight we should be looking at, as opposed to looking at the plight of the criminals. And I think that's important.
And the thing I just want to ask you a little bit more on it again is, what is the connection between bail reform and increased crime? Can you, let's just, because because I know that would probably be a very controversial thing.
Right.
And so I just want to like be clear, because when you're talking about victims of crime and people are making these arguments, but because of the nature of the argument that you're making, I want you to be really, really clear on it, right? Like you stay, and I don't want you taken out of context. You did say that bail reform, and you mentioned it as a reason for the increased amount of crime within the West Ward.
Right.
Can you just explain that directly, right?
I think in urban areas, you have a large percentage of unemployment. You have overcrowding. You have a lack of community resources. I think, you know, in urban areas, you have overcrowding in many of the prisons. You have a lot of the law enforcement officials who are not documenting crimes properly. I think, you know, it's often the case of not the defendants not having good representation in court. I think the plea bargains that come down really have an impact the victims if they feel traumatized twice. I know as a victim of violent crime, I felt that the victims should have been given more consideration than the assailants, and so I think all of that. All those are contributing factors. I don't think it's a one size fit all. I think it's a case by case. But I think in urban areas, crime is rampant because a lack of education, lack of opportunities. A lot of our offenders have records, and so it makes it very difficult for them to acquire decent employment, and so that leads to them, going back out into the streets. So there are a lot of contributing factors, and I can't just pinpoint one. But I think in urban areas, you're going to see a steady increase in crime because the bail reform is just having an adverse effect.
Okay, thank you. And Zaid, do you have a follow-up to ask on that issue of crime? Because I know that this is something that's particularly an issue of yours.
No, you kind of went at it. I'm sorry you went through that, Linda, being this, having been victimized by that, and has been victimized by that several times. I'm gonna go a different track. There are things that are happening in town,
right?
That are that are very particular to Newark being perhaps a national model for community-based crime reduction. What say you about those programs? How do you feel about their effectiveness or their need for more support?
Yeah, definitely need for more support. Definitely need for more training. I think our officers need training when it comes to cultural competency, cultural advocacy. I know oftentimes the community wants to push back and say we don't need stop and frisk. Well, we do need to stop and inquire and ask questions. Why are we speeding? Why are we going down this one-way street? Why are you guys don't have your seatbelt on? Why are you guys not in school doing school hours? A lot of the juvenile offenders are committing adult crimes. And so, even as I watch the media, I'm looking at the news reports, I'm seeing an increasing number of females who are accomplices and involved in some of the major crimes that are occurring in the community. So there's just a plethora of reasons why crime is rampant. And I know that recreation and lack of recreation and mentoring in the community is one. Lack of job opportunities. I think a lot of the parents and grandparents are overwhelmed with obtaining the type of services and support that they need in raising their teenagers and young adults. There's just a plethora of opportunities that need to be presented to the community, but I think we need to look at the individuals case by case, because some of these offenders are repeat offenders. Some of them are not just low-level offenders, but I look at interventions. I was at a school recently, and I asked the principal, what interventions do you have at your school for all the gang violence that's occurring here? Well, we have PAL. Well, PAL is more of a prevention, but not an intervention. You can't expect someone out here who's robbing and stealing and committing aggravated assaults to embrace a PAL program at 17, 18, 19 years old. That must be something that you probably would introduce at an earlier age, maybe at the middle school level. But
and what is PAL?
Police Athletic League.
Okay.
And I went into several schools where there was major gang activity occurring. I went into the bathroom, and there was gang graffiti all over the mirrors, all over the ceiling, all over the walls. I said to the administrator and the security guards, are you going to look at all of this and tell me that there's not a gang problem in here? I talked to the students. They tell me that the kids walk around with their bandanas around the building. They have ankle bracelets, and they're throwing up gang signs. Are you guys not aware of that? Do we need to have gang prevention specialists in the school? Because somebody's missing something.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And again, the chance to really explain your arguments is always important for us, right? We are running shorter on time, and I want to get to the next part of the question, or the next question, the next issue, which was about garbage and the West Ward. And I'm not just talking about garbage like in the streets. I'm talking about as in abandoned houses, houses that have trash on the property. There were complaints about the West Ward just having certain neighborhoods, certain houses within neighborhoods, and that are blighted, and they were complaining about the lack of action on those houses and on the garbage in general that's around. So what do you think? What is your vision about that? As in, like, what do you think? Do you agree with that as a major issue in the West Ward?
It is a major issue. I was on 12th Street and 12th Avenue last Friday, and I stopped and I was actually speaking to the pastor of the church there in the corner.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I was also asking, what would be the policies or advocacies that you have?
Well, I think we had to train and we had to empower our block association presidents, organizing block associations, and our district leaders, because a lot of it is illegal dumping. I was on 12th Street and 12th Avenue. Illegal dumping had occurred there. I called. I did Facebook Live, and within 24 hours, those 15 bags of garbage and debris were picked up. It was paneling. It was floor tiles. These were not things that were put there by the residents. Somebody's doing some illegal dumping from other parts of the state and county. I know someone poured some cement down one of the sewers after he finished doing some work in one of the communities and was caught by the police. So a lot of it is illegal dumping. And I think, when we have some cameras in the community to kind of catch some of these assailants, I think when we have strong block association presidents and district leaders who are canvassing their communities to see where the eyesores are, I think when we get buildings boarded up, houses boarded up, and that we have DPW and code enforcement, actually holding landlords accountable, because some of the are the landlords who are purchasing these properties, the owners of these properties who don't live in the Westwood, who don't live in Newark, who are purchasing these properties and not keeping them up. And I think they need to be held accountable with fine after fine after fine until they start, taking care of their properties.
All right, and thank you. Do you have a follow-up for that, Ed or Zaid?
Well, I think that for me, one of the things is that, folks have been complaining not only about garbage, Brother Linden, but they've been complaining about how dark it is in the West Ward. Mm-hmm. How is that problem being addressed at this point? And if elected, what would you do about that to make it?
There are a lot of street lights that are not working in the community. I've driven down Roseville, Orange Street. I've gotten off 280, and 5 or 6 lights in a row were out. Then you have dimly lit street lights that are not as bright as they are in the North Ward and the East Ward. And I think, we need to get with PSC&G and hold them accountable, because, it's a detriment to the community. I say to the residents, in the meantime, you have porch lights, please turn them on, especially during those peak hours when there's a lot of activity on your particular streets. I think we need to take ownership of our blocks, get out and get the numbers off to those poles, call PSC&G, take pictures when those lights are out, videos. I think, the proof is needed for a lot of the change to take place. When you taking pictures and videoing and you're recording and documenting things, I think that improves the quality of life in the community.
And I just wanted to ask you, Brother Linden, what is the decision that's been made with that that Pabst Blue Ribbon space up there? What are they going to do with that?
There were so many talks about putting a mall there, and then someone talked about putting a healthcare center. And so there's a lot of discussion, but I have not heard anything concrete as to what's going to happen there. Unfortunately, we have a current councilman who's not shared a lot of the information with the community about the different developments that have been occurring in the West Ward. There have been so many properties being redeveloped, so much development occurring in the West Ward that the residents are just not aware of. We don't know who's developing, who's purchasing, what's going there. I know there was a talk about putting a healthcare center across the street from West Side High School, which I was opposed to, because I worked diligently to bring a school-based clinic to 13th Avenue School, to Central High School, and they're terribly underutilized. As a matter of fact, we've had to reduce the services in those clinics because people are not coming to use a dental clinic. They're not coming to get physicals. And so we've had to, even cut the staffing there. So to build another clinic in the community when the other existing ones on 16th Avenue, Camden, 13th Avenue are not being utilized, I don't think that was a good look.
Okay, so and that's interesting as well. We are going to ask you one last question that we ask of everybody, but we're going to say, like, win or lose, we want to have you back on the show because the stuff that you're talking about is just interesting, like you in terms of what's going on in the community. And I just want to ask more questions about this, like what's going on with underutilized clinics. That stuff, nothing to do with the campaign, but just the perspective about what's going on is good, right? Like, so talk to last question, and who we always ask this of all of our guests: who's your favorite hip-hop artist, individual or group? You can even tell me who you're just rocking with now, or somebody who inspires you or inspires your campaign.
You know, I listen to different genres of music. I love Jay-Z. I love Ludacris. You know, there's so many artists. I don't really have favorite artists. I just have, you know, various genres of music because I'm actually a music buff. You know, so when you're singing out here, you know, you're into different genres of music. I'm into jazz. I'm into hip hop. I'm into gospel. You know, so I don't really have a particular hip hop artist. You know, but I just love good music.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We very much appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
Welcome to All Politics. I mean, we're glad you came back. We're honored to have you back on. And good luck in the campaign.
I appreciate you guys.
Good luck, Lyndon.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, these have been some good conversations, right? Like,
yeah.
And you know, when we're talking to the people who are just running in the East Ward and the South Ward,
they're grounded in their communities.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, these are people we need to be talking, win or lose in terms of the election. These are people we need to have back on the show just to give us, you know, their perspective about what's going on in the community. Because so many of these candidates, right, like are very much grounded and each has a unique perspective. So it's just interesting watching these races just from.
But you know what's a real problem too, and it was a problem when I was a young man and I lived in the West Ward, right? And would walk to go to 8th Street Gym, you know, was really about them lights. It seemed like that's been a forever problem in the West Ward, man.
And I grew up and lived in the West Ward most of my childhood up until my early 20s, right? So you know, the West Ward is near and dear to me, as will always be. South Orange Avenue, 18th Avenue, just, you know, Mount Vernon Elementary
West Ward for Georgia.
You said what?
Your sister just left the West Ward for Georgia.
Right. So like, yeah, so right, man, families live there. Some family members lived in the West Ward for over 30 years, right? When my parents bought a house in the West on West End Avenue. Live on 77 West End Avenue for years and years. So that's always good. But we now have both of our guests on for the next segment, and so we are honored to have Joe Johnson on today from the ACLU, and Insha Rahman on from the Vera Institute, and we are happy to have both of them on to talk about bail reform. Right? We actually had a conversation about you in the last segment in talking about bail reform with one of our candidates, and so we're gonna get into that during this, because I think that his perspective is one that, you know, has got to be dealt with in terms of what was said. I don't know if you heard, but we'll definitely get into it when we'll definitely get into it here. So, but I'm going to give you a proper. I can't really give you a proper introduction. That is not, you know, my place to give you a proper introduction. The proper introduction place is always to Zaid Muhammad. Zaid Muhammad always gives most proper introductions, and he has spoken well of both of you. He very much appreciates the work that Vera Institute and ACLU do for the community, that unsung work that we benefit from but don't always know about. So welcome to All Politics, our local. Zaid, give them the proper.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we put it on.
Let me just do it this way. This is the beginning of the baseball season. These two young folks just did a powerful presentation for our public safety roundtable that comes out of the South Ward on the issue. Because a lot of folks really don't even know about bail reform, and as these things, you know, as things happen in the press, as things happen in real life situations, like Lyndon, you know, being a survivor of violence, the emotional dimensions that come with that are heavy, and they push things a certain way. But then whenever we're trying to do work on the other side, from the community-based side, we're always told that we have to, always provide the data to show how our work is effective, right? Well, we've got two experts here who were showing how bail reform has in fact been effective, and New Jersey has actually been a model for how bail reform can possibly look. So I'll let them develop that. Vera is the vice president of Vera Institute. Insha is the vice president of the Vera Institute. and Insha, I love your name. I won't come back to your first name because that means a whole lot to those of us who are Muhammad types, if you understand what I'm saying.
Indeed it does.
But the Vera Institute has been an important vehicle for this dimension of our community that needs so much attention. Joe wears a lot of hats for the ACLU. Not only is their point person for bail reform, he's their representative on Newark's CCRB that we're still fighting for with real authority, and he's also a very important point person on the whole question of the struggle for getting more counselors into schools and the depolicing of our schools. The whole campaign for counselors and not cops. Joe was up in all of that. So we've got two powerful hitters, cleanup hitters who've been knocking it out of the park. So let them come in and talk about what bail reform actually is, what the data actually says, and so folks can help make informed decisions about where they stand on that.
All right. So just to let you know that we are still going to have one. We are going to be interviewing most of the candidates for the West Ward, and we actually have Oscar James in the background, but we'll be interviewing after this interview is over. So just for and we also have two candidates on next week as well who are running. We have Chikose is on for next week.
What happened to Jonathan? That never happens to him. He's one of our tech specialists, as well as our founding co-producer, right? Insha, why don't you lead in and talk about in big picture this for us, right? Because the Vera Institute has been on this on the national front. Joe, you come in and behind her and talk about what this means for New Jersey and what it's meant and what it means in the immediate political climate that we're dealing with. We tried it. We got you backed up, Jonathan.
All right, cool. And so it's great because it was like right in the middle. But we have and we also, like, next week we have Levita Johnson on, and we have Chikose Onyema on for next week as well, running from those wards. Just letting everyone know that we are trying to interview everybody from each of the races. So
yeah, that's an important dimension of the show, and it's that season. And then when the local election is over, we're going to be bringing a whole lot of stuff for the whole question of voting rights nationally. We ain't playing. We're not going backwards on that. But go ahead, Insha. Why don't you start as we said, big picture this for us as in the unique way that Vera Institute can do that.
Sure. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for having this important conversation, which is not so much about bail reform as much as it is about public safety and the fact that each and every one of us in our communities want to be safe. And as I was listening to Brother Lyndon talk about, the ways in which our communities have been underinvested in, I thought, yes, I agree with you. At each and every turn, we need more streetlights. We need more programs for our young people. We need more both prevention and intervention. And bail reform, which happened in New Jersey in 2017, is actually one of the best public safety investments that this state could have made. And let me just say a little bit about what bail reform in New Jersey did, and then zoom out to the national picture as well, because as you said, Brother Zaid, the Vera Institute is a national organization. We work across the country. And we have really been looking at this issue of not only bail reform, but really public safety from a national perspective. And what is happening in New Jersey is unique. It is profound. It is unprecedented. And right now it's under threat, which is why I'm really glad you all are hosting this conversation with myself and Joe today. So in New Jersey, after bail reform went into effect in 2017, two remarkable things happened. For one, we know in New Jersey that there were people incarcerated on $2,500 bail who just couldn't make it, because we know that the average American would struggle to pull together $400 in an emergency. I'm sure for some people listening to this, they say, yes, I can relate. Yet across this country, the average felony bail is $10,000. And so even if you go to a bail bondsman and go put that 10% down, $1,000, most people don't have that kind of money. And in 2017, New Jersey did away mostly with money bail. And so now it's a decision about you're either going to be released or, you know, in very specific circumstances where you pose a risk to the community and to public safety, we will detain you, we'll keep you in jail. And since bail reform in New Jersey, over 80% of people are released pre-trial, meaning they get to go home to their communities, to their families, to their jobs, to their loved ones. And that actually resulted in the jail population in New Jersey today. It is literally half of what it was before bail reform. So that is a lot of people free, a lot of families kept intact, a lot of communities and employers who benefit from having their people home. And that is a tremendous, tremendous benefit. Now, I know when I say that, many people might wonder, well, that's a lot of people who are not incarcerated who are probably, you know, running amok on our streets. But it turns out another fascinating phenomenon happened because of bail reform in New Jersey, which is actually that crime overall went down, and violent crime that we, of course, all care about, it went down by 10% since 2017, which is a number that is remarkable and dramatic and didn't happen across the rest of the country. And I would say it's because what we did was we invested in public safety by keeping people home and in their communities, and not making money be the determinant of whether somebody could actually be released or whether they had to fight their case from the inside of a jail cell. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't feel safe. I see these headlines of shootings and homicides, or worse yet, I hear those gunshots in my neighborhood, or I know somebody who has been a victim of crime, or I myself have been a victim of crime. And here's what I say to that is, yes, all of that is real. All of us have experienced, I think, a sense of feeling less safe today after the pandemic than we felt a couple of years ago. But if you blame the wrong causes, then you actually miss the opportunity to find the right solution. And bail reform has in fact been good for public safety in New Jersey, and that's been true everywhere across the country. And if you're blaming bail reform and trying to roll back bail reform, what you'll find is that's not the cause, and therefore you haven't actually addressed the problem of violence and crime in our communities. So that's the sort of larger perspective, both here in New Jersey. That trend holds true across the country. Every jurisdiction that is engaged in true bail reform, the way that New Jersey has actually benefited, both in terms of people and communities and also public safety. And so right now we have been working with folks like Joe and others in New Jersey to really protect bail reform, because the rest of the country is looking towards what New Jersey is doing, because New Jersey has been such a leader on this front.
And I'm going to push back a little bit, just and either either of the guests can answer. But when our former the person who was on just a few minutes ago, Lyndon Brown, he's running for Westward councilman, and he's not. I mean, he's someone who's rooted in the community. Whether you agree with him, disagree with him on whatever, whether you're supporting for candidate or not, he clearly is someone who's been grounded in the West Ward for years as a resident. And what he talked about specifically was just noticing that that people were being let out who had histories of crime, were repeat offenders who he had known since they were in middle school, and that there was a level to which that, and in his articulation, and the reason again why this is so powerful is it comes from someone who's rooted in the community. And so if there are going to be questions to push back against bail reform, that probably is the strongest argument and the most difficult to actually deal with in terms of in the communities that are most affected, you have a strong voice, a consistent, like in the community voice, who made that connection, and made that connection because of a number of experiences of not just individually victims of crime, but knowing many of the criminals, right? Knowing them from the time they were kids, knowing them growing up, knowing what had not been done, and then concluded, right, based on not just anecdotal experience, not just something that can be as easily dismissed, but from the perspective of someone who has actually known what's going on in the West Ward of Newark, right? So how do you push back? Like, what do you say that not just addresses it theoretically, I've known someone, but how do you deal with that when the person is like, no, bail reform has been a cause. I've known specifically these criminal, like in terms of histories, right? And in my community, in the West Ward, right, crime has gone up, made that connection with it. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so first, right? I mean, as Insha said, right? If folks are experiencing violence and experiencing crime within their community, it's something that we should be concerned about and trying to address. We definitely do not disagree with that at all, right? We should be trying to address any situation which is making our communities less safe. What we have seen, though, is that there has been a lot of anecdotal kind of storytelling about situations like this, right, where people recognize that a few people within their community might have been arrested in the past and then let out, and they see them running around in the community again. The data shows that very few of those people are actually recommitting serious crimes once they are let out. But even with that being said, we aren't saying that our bail system as it currently works is 100% perfect, right? We can't point to any real criminal justice system and say this is 100% perfect. This is how it should continue to work forever. There could be tweaks that could happen to the bail system, minor tweaks, as we move forward, that address these kind of anecdotal stories, but we need to make sure that we're rooting them in the data that the court system is able to pull, because otherwise we're not really going to be coming up with a solution that is narrowly tailored to address those individuals that have been causing issues within their communities. And, as some folks say from anecdotal stories, are getting in and then they're out and then they're in and they're out multiple times. Our understanding from the court system is that folks that commit violent crimes, there's a possibility that they are released the first time, but it is very, very, very unlikely that they are going to be released again a second time. So the idea that there is a kind of continuous revolving door that is allowing violent criminals to get out time and time and time again, the data does not back that up. But again, we are open to making minor changes and tweaks to the system as we go forward, if we can, really address those issues that are popping up and make sure that they're data-based.
Thank you.
And if I can add to that, I think Joe is exactly right at looking at the data, and there is a lot of good data out there about how bail reform is working in New Jersey. And it isn't the case that people keep repeatedly getting released on violent offenses just to go on and commit more crime. The other part I want to say, though, is most people who go to jail come back to our communities. And the fact of incarceration itself is just kicking the public safety problem. It's kicking that can down the road. And what we have seen time and time again from other jurisdictions, and New Jersey has done this as well, is if what you do is you intervene with the person who, say, got arrested for a serious assault or even for possession of a gun, and we say, look, what is driving this behavior? What is driving your perhaps involvement in a gang or in some kind of retaliatory violence? And you actually address the underlying issue. You get people connected to services and stability. That's the best investment you can make in public safety. Bail reform, and when people are incarcerated pre-trial, that's not giving people services or supports. It's just, again, like I said, kicking the public safety problem. It's kicking that can down the line.
So your answer would be, if you're saying that people have been released back into the community, well, they're going to eventually, like most people who get incarcerated are released back into the community. Whether there's bail reform, not bail reform, they're released back into the community. There are very few people who get life in prison.
That's right.
and usually they're released back into the community no matter what. So the problem that you're talking about in terms of being released back into the community is not a problem with bail reform, because that's just the criminal justice system, right? The criminal justice system doesn't put most people in jail for a long period of time, and probably shouldn't, because then you'd either have like people locked up forever on small offenses and destroy families, or you have the situation where people are released eventually back into the community, but now they've been released back into the community after being like hurt and before they've been convicted of a crime, and they've just been made worse for it, because prisons, access to being in prisons, being incarcerated, usually never makes anyone better to come back to the community.
That's exactly right. And, so I sit here in Brooklyn, New York, and I've watched New York go through bail reform, much in the way that New Jersey has. And New York passed bail reform in 2019, and the backlash to it was immediate. I'm sure folks sitting here listening in New Jersey are like, yep, I heard the news, I saw the headlines. And legislators here in New York actually rolled back bail reform, some in 2020. They changed some provisions thinking this would turn down the volume and it would address the problem that we're seeing with people repeatedly getting arrested for, say, shoplifting or other kinds of relatively low-level offenses, but that still have an impact on the community, and certainly for our small business owners here in New York City and across the state. But the legislature changed bail reform. They did some rollbacks in 2020, but they didn't actually address the underlying issue of why these people are getting arrested repeatedly. And without addressing that issue, did we actually solve the problem? Did repeat petty offenses go down because we changed the law? No, it didn't. And so that goes to my point that New Jersey has an opportunity to learn from other places and to hold the line and to say, we can invest in more services and resources, and we can address the underlying problem, as opposed to just making some tweaks in the law itself. And as Joe said, there may be some tweaks that should be made, but rolling back bail reform in the ways that have been proposed right now won't actually address the problem.
So when you're saying tweaks, right, what do you mean?
Yes, so I'm happy to hop in. So I ideally what we would this kind of skipping a little bit closer to the end, but in terms of like alternatives that we would like to see, we're currently working with the court system, the attorney general's office, lawmakers, the mayors, to try to come to a compromise solution. And we can kind of backtrack and talk about what the current proposal is and compare it to some of the alternatives. But there are a number of things that we really could do to try to address the problem. We saw some data recently from the court system that showed that there was very different outcomes depending on where in the state you lived and why these things were happening. So, for example, the way that it works is that the way that bail reform currently works, and I'll just take a step back so folks can see the bigger picture here. The way that bail reform works now is that we got rid of cash bail, but there's two buckets of people when you get arrested and charged with an offense. There is the presumption of detention. And this is for people that are charged with murder or other offenses that carry with it a life sentence of imprisonment. A very narrow group of offenses. But what it basically means is if you get charged with one of these offenses, you are going to be detained 99% of the time, practically all of the time. If you're arrested on one of these major, very serious crimes that puts you in the presumption of detention, you are going to be detained pre-trial.
And what is that? Like, what are those crimes? Because often is that a loophole, right? Like what are these crimes that where you're going to be detained no matter what?
So I would need to pull up the actual list to see the things that are life sentence crimes. But we're talking about murder. We're talking about very, very serious sexual violence offenses. We are talking about very serious, potentially other types of offenses that can potentially result in the death of another individual. But I'll try to pull up that list by the end of this call. That way I can read off some of the other charges. But it's a relatively narrow list, and it's not that inclusive, and it was created that way on purpose. As folks would remember, when we passed bail reform 5 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was a bipartisan process. The Republicans agreed with it. The Democrats agreed with it. Everybody was on board. And that was because it was such a long process that went through a lot of thought. And it went through a lot of different iterations to try to figure out how can we really do this. And what folks decided on was, let's have this small group of presumption of detention cases. They're the most serious offenses, and folks will be detained almost all of the time. But for everybody else, there's the presumption of release. And what that really does is it puts things a little bit up in the air. It means that you might be released and you can be released, but the judges have the opportunity to detain you if they find that you are either a risk of not coming back for trial, or that you are actually a risk to the community. You're a danger to the community. So there's the two different buckets. Presumption of detention, you're not overcoming that. Presumption of release, that can be overcome, and people that have the presumption of release are detained all of the time. So a lot of the folks that have presumption of release and they get brought in on gun crimes that do have a presumption of release, they are still detained. It's a kind of amorphous bucket that allows for judges to have some discretion.
And just to explain that, right? Like, you're saying that whether it's presumption of detention or presumption of release, you're still detained. Does that mean that you're detained until a judge can hear and they can make a case as to your release? It is just a case has to be made for everyone's release. Like, a judge has to sign off on it based on the evidence of everyone who's released. It's not just so maybe that's part of a perception thing. It's not just you can't be kept without bail,
right,
no matter what. It's you're presumed to be someone who could be released, but the prosecutor can make arguments if they're like, hey, this person's not going to come back. We have evidence that this person has been committing these crimes and not coming back. Police had to hunt them down. And so even though they might get presumption of release, the very specific evidence against this person leads us to think that they would be a flight risk because they've done it before. This is like the third time that they've skipped actually the trial. So they should not have the presumption of release. Is that the way you're saying that it works right now?
Absolutely. People are not coming in and getting charged and like they walk through the entrance of the revolving door, they get their papers, and then they get pushed right back out the exit of the revolving door, right? There's a process. And as you just laid out, the prosecutor has the ability to make these arguments. And what I kind of wanted to get to was what we saw in the data is that in different counties, different things were happening. So in Mercer County, where Trenton is located, what we found is that for people that were brought in on gun charges, then released and went on to commit crimes is not a large amount of these people. But of those people, most of the folks were released because the prosecutor did not put forth a motion to detain them. They did not try to detain that person. Now,
so you're saying that's the difference between the way it was originally done in New York and the way it was done in New Jersey?
No. I apologize. So just here within the state of New Jersey, we're seeing disparate outcomes amongst counties. So I'm talking about Mercer County with that, where we saw that in many cases, prosecutors were not seeking to detain these individuals. But if you compare it to Essex County, where Newark is, what we saw was that prosecutors were putting these motions forward almost all of the time, but the judge was not accepting those motions. So we understand that there needs to be a lot of training in both for both the prosecutors and for the judges to get a more consistent understanding and in practice of when are prosecutors making these motions and what type of cases, what types of facts do we need to have for prosecutors to be making these motions, and what types of facts do we need to be having for the judges to be accepting these motions. So that's one of the major things that we would love to see happen is the court system and the AG really work to make sure that prosecutors and judges across the state are approaching this issue in the same exact way. Now, just to talk quickly about what the current proposal is trying to do.
And just saying, you actually have a little bit more time. We have scheduled Oscar James for next week, so you have a little bit more time as well. So, but continue.
Awesome. So what the current proposal is trying to do, just so folks are aware, in February of early 2022, so a few months ago now, a few lawmakers, a few urban mayors, and some law enforcement representatives got together and held a press conference and basically said, there's this increase in gun violence and we want to address it. So they announced that they're going to be introducing a bill. That bill is numbered A2426. And what that bill tries to do, at least originally, what the original version of the bill tried to do, is move all gun-related offenses from the bucket of presumption of release to the bucket of presumption of detention. Now, as we kind of talked through before, you're not getting out of that presumption of detention. And the AOC ran a bunch of data, and what they found was very, very concerning about what would happen if this proposal went into law. So here's what the data found. If this proposal went into law, more than 2,000 additional people would be detained every single year pre-trial. More than 70% of those people that would be detained would be Black people. What they also found was that only 10% of those 2,000 people detained would be likely to go on to commit another serious offense in their communities while awaiting trial. Now, don't want to say that that's a minimal number.
I was going to ask you. We're going to have to talk about that, right?
Right. Crime is crime, but that is the recidivism rate that we are very used to seeing. 10% that's the recidivism rate that has been consistent over the years, and it is kind of consistent amongst violent crimes and nonviolent crimes. So not to say that it is a minimal amount, that's the amount that we should be trying to address. The issue is that if 10% of the folks are committing those crimes and 90% of those folks aren't, if your solution is to throw 100% of those people into prison, into jail, it is far too broad of a solution, right? The system is working for those 90%, but it's not working for those 10% that are getting out and committing crimes.
Well, here's the reason why I think that, and it is just my opinion on this, but I think that the argument, the way you're saying it, seems to not be persuasive to me on one. And I agree with you, right? Like in terms of bail reform, all the stuff you're talking about. But here's the reason why I think that it is not persuasive, especially after hearing, Lyndon Brown, right? And the articulation of it. You were like, 10%, that's bad, but 10% gun crime can mean somebody dies, right? And so that 10%, I think that our way you are making that argument will, to me, I think it will fall flat because everyone is thinking that 10%, I'd rather keep all people in jail and have somebody live than let this 10% go out and kill somebody, right? Because that is going to be the response to that particular argument. And I don't think that you will be able to overcome that. My suggestion would be, instead of making that argument, which is true but not persuasive because it almost belittles the victims of crime, and it underestimates why the victim, by being victimized by crime, right, is so horrible, right? I think the more because I agree with bail reform the way that you are talking about it, but the more persuasive argument to me is those 10% are going to get out no matter what, right? Like, they're not going to jail for life. That is not going to happen. There's a misconception, right? Like, it's not about whether or not 10% get out now and commit more crimes, or 10% get out later and commit more crimes. But the whole point is that you actually might have more people committing more crimes, because now that 90% you put back in jail, right? They have been more traumatized by jail. That is an explanatory reason why your data shows that, like, it makes sense given your data. Your data says that if you actually do bail reform, right? Like, if you actually do that and you incarcerate less, you incarcerate fewer people, right? In terms of bail, that crime goes down. I think that all of the explanatory power with that, right? That I think is supported by data that you have, is that jail is brutal, as we hear in stories over and over again, and people who are detained lose their jobs, they lose their livelihood. You actually create more criminals that way. If you hate criminality, don't put more people who aren't going to commit crime in jail. You need to have programs to address those 10%, which actually starts to answer the question that Lyndon Brown was talking about, right? Because he was real big on that, as in there's no interventions. There's no interventions in these populations, right? So it's not about bail reform having to solve for all the problems of crime. It is about bail reform also solving some of the problems of crime, right? As in, it solves from further criminality, because instead of those 10% that would be recidivists. You have more numbers because your numbers say we went down. You criminalize fewer people, it goes down. It's logical, makes sense. Nobody has ever made the argument that jail has made them better. And if there's 100%, if most of the people who are incarcerated will come back to your neighborhoods, which most people in our neighborhoods know, then we'd rather them come back sooner than later and come back to interventions.
Yeah.
Bail doesn't solve it.
And that
Right.
and that's the problem Eric Adams is having in New York, right? That's why he can't prove that. And everybody's complaining with all the murders and people can't go to Times Square and all of that. He got that very problem.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's exactly right. It's the question of, do we want to solve this problem of crime now, or do we want to wait until later? And so bail reform solves one problem, which is we are incarcerating fewer people, and therefore it's called in sort of the criminal justice business, the criminogenic effect, meaning quite literally it makes people more likely to be arrested and to commit crime and be convicted of crime in the future if they go to jail. There's a statistic which even 23 hours in jail makes you 24% more likely in the future to get arrested. So
that's the argument.
Yeah. So Jonathan, when you say we need to keep people from, being exposed to more criminality, that is exactly right. But we also have to pair it with the right services in the community. And so what we're seeing in New York City is, we've had some really violent incidents on the street, in the subway. And the only response so far has been to do more of the same, which is more police officers. And in New York City, we have a police department where we spend $6 billion a year on its operations, and it's not working because more police is not going to get you more public safety in this moment, where what you need is programs and interventions that actually address the root cause of why people are engaging in violence in the first place.
So really, I think that the argument is when you're talking about more policing, when you're talking about lowering bail reform, you're not interested in lowering crime. You're interested in getting police paid, right? Because there's a difference between getting police paid and solving crime. And that is supported with all of the data. If you really care about the communities they're in, right? Do you want them coming home before they're more violent or after they're more violent? Before they've been traumatized by prison, right? Or after they've been traumatized by more prison? Because they're coming home, right? And I think that becomes the argument that appeals to people in the community. It is not like putting people in jail for longer will make them angrier and have less when they come out. Does not solve the problem. It actually makes it worse. But you are actually the low crime law and order, but you're a law, order, and humanity. And I think the way the argument has to be played is you are law and order, but you're law and order and humanity, right? Because that's the way to lower crime. You got law and order, that increases crime because all you're doing is making people angrier, and you're hurting people and you're traumatizing people because we don't have a system where jail actually makes any. Give me the argument. Does jail make people better? Does putting someone in jail for 6 months or holding them, does it make them less violent when they come out? If it does, then hey man, you got an argument. But if you have no data to support what you're saying, none, right? If all the evidence goes the other way, they're supporting criminality. They're supporting more crime, right? You are the ones that actually are dealing with the crime because you are dealing with the root causes of that crime. And all the data goes one way.
Right, but John, that's a great politically emotional conversation. That doesn't hold water in the court, though. You see, because
we're talking about a political conversation, Ed. We're talking about people rolling it back.
But my point is, John, is people who live in the community, right? What they want is they really want something to be done, right? So if we don't get the, like Brother Lyndon Brown was saying, if we don't spend the money on the front end, then we are going to spend the money on the back end. Problem is that we never are putting that money forward to create the kind of training programs and the kind of opportunities for these people, right? When they get in trouble, to have some sort of option as opposed to putting somebody in jail.
And I think we're saying the same thing, but what I'm saying is what you're talking about, what the ACLU is talking about, what the Vera Institute talking about is actual crime reduction. What those other people are talking about
I agree.
are the same things
I agree.
that balloon crime, right? So when you need to characterize it as they are pro-crime because their solutions are stupid because they create crime and all the data goes one way. You're talking about stand up in court. I'm just saying all the facts are on one side.
But more police have never worked, John.
Right.
So
That's
so
my
when
point.
they make
Yes.
that argument, that's never worked for us.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
All the evidence goes one way. Ed, we're saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, if I can put a dollar amount on just how we are spending money and what we are getting for it. So in this country, per capita, meaning per person, we spend $362 per person a year on policing because we spend $115 billion across this system, across this country, nationally. $115 billion with a B.
Oof.
And so I know that's a tremendous amount of money. Imagine what 115 billion could buy in our communities for our young people, for our, for our elders. And then we have seen in places like New York and Massachusetts, for every $1 to $2 that you invest in community violence intervention, which is something that Newark has done a lot of. We've heard Patterson is starting a community street team. And it's basically getting people on the street who are skilled at spotting where violence is about to happen to intervene with people who are the perpetrators of violence to say, don't do it. Let us get to the root causes. Let's find another way. It is incredibly effective. So like I said, in Massachusetts and New York, it's been studied, the $1 to $2 per person that we have invested in community violence intervention. It's reduced gun violence by somewhere between 15 to 36%, depending on the community that we're talking about. 15 to 36%. That is a tremendous return on investment for very, very little money. And so it just tells us if we were following the data, we would actually be investing in the front end on community counselors and case managers and violence interrupters who are preventing violence in the first place, because the police, all they can do is respond after the fact.
Right. And if I could just add, right, like I think we all agree on this one key point, right? What we really need if we're talking about decreasing gun crimes or violent crimes within our communities is a comprehensive solution. And the issue that we see is that anytime something comes up in this realm, the state's first instinct, and they don't go much further than the first instinct, is always, okay, let's throw more people in jail. And we know that that doesn't work, right? Especially that's always the answer, especially when we're talking about the Black community. They'll write it up and pass it in a day. So,
and I think the phrasing of it isn't just it doesn't work; it makes the situation worse.
Right. Yeah. No,
like,
it makes it worse.
And of course, that narrative is always fed and driven by the police unions.
Right. Absolutely. And our current stance, right, is that if So there were some changes to the bill from the original version that the AOC created a bunch of data around to include some other non-gun related crimes. And what we kind of think is going to end up happening from those changes is that more people will be detained, but it'll slightly lessen the racial disparity. But our stance really is that if this proposal goes through, we think that this is probably the biggest driver of mass incarceration in the last decade plus, right? New Jersey has been going in the right direction in terms of how can we make sure that we are not just incarcerating and making things worse. And we don't want to see that start to roll back, but that does not invalidate any of the experiences that we're actually living through in the community. So anytime that there is violence, we need to be addressing it. We just need to make sure that the state doesn't try to address it by signing a bill that incarcerates everybody within a week, and we don't have the opportunity to even have a community discourse on it.
Right. And again, the reason why I've just been pushing back on the way the arguments are being presented is because the way that they're presented, usually it's like, oh, those ACLU people, them, those liberal, mostly white people who are just, just from the community. They don't live there. They don't know what real crime is. And that's the perception that you have to deal with, right? Like that is going to be the thing in the front of the room. That is the thing in the front of everyone's head. And so when people are complaining, when citizens are complaining, this is exactly how the 1994 crime bill got passed. It got passed because of a large demand from within the Black community.
Joe Biden leading the way, by the way.
Not just Joe Biden leading the way.
I know, but I'm just saying.
No, I mean, it's important to say this. Most Black leaders supported it. That's right. True, exactly. Right? That's just fact, right? Exactly. Rangel supported it, right? Exactly. Mayors supported it, right? Black mayors of Black cities supported the 1994 crime bill.
Don't want to go
because
backwards
of the way in which they were thinking about crime, the ACLU, and the solutions. I think the wonderful thing that you have right now is all the data goes on your side, that they make crime worse. You make crime lower. They increase crime, right? So it's not just they don't solve for the problem. It's like, no. If you want more crime, lock more people up. Because after they get out, they'll create more crime. We'll lock them up. You're not going to lock everyone up forever. You don't want to lock everyone up forever. Right. And if you do that, that creates other problems within the community. Because do you want to like create an alternate slave state? How's that going to happen when people don't have their fathers, right, or mothers right there? How's that going to affect the next generation? You actually are a pro-crime. Like they are actually a pro-crime agenda. They're a pro-crime. Let's get police and prison officials paid, right? Because people are profiting off of the incarceration and death of Black people. And maybe say that, right? Stop trying to profit off of the death and incarceration of Black people. And if you cared about crime, you would actually forward from some solutions that all the data says work. And I think that needs to be screamed out. All the data is on one side. Show me the evidence.
See how calmly he's presenting this too, by the way.
Oh, you got to scream this.
I know that's
you got to be like, no, you are pro-crime. You do nothing to stop crime. You actually make it worse. Here's why you make it worse. Here is the evidence that I have that you worsen crime. The only thing you do is get mostly white police officers, mostly white prison guards paid. You don't solve
the problem. John, I gotta say, I think one of the most important things we can do for our communities, and when I say our communities, I'm talking about Black and brown communities, is expand our ideas of what is possible to address crime and violence. Because for time immemorial, the only two options have been we do nothing or we do policing. Mm-hmm. And we've never gotten other options. And so, of course, you have Black leaders coming in and saying, well, we have to, do more of the same because we've never had a third option. And we're actually in a moment, and this is a testament to the remarkable work that's happening locally in New Jersey, in Newark, with the community street team, with other organizations that have been doing the hard work on the ground, is there is actually a third option and we know it works. So why we aren't putting that front and center as the solution, why we're saying, well, we've got to roll back bail reform, it means that it's just a lack of imagination, a lack of options. And I think we have a chance to really educate and say, we have other options, and those are the options that are going to actually deliver safety.
And I just think being more rhetorical. I think that conservatives win the debate because they're more rhetorically creative, right? We're law and order, you're pro-crime. It's difficult to get past.
Crazy as hell too,
right? Like if you don't up your rhetoric, you will not get past it, right?
This is debate. This is debate coach, conducting the clinic right now. I want y'all to appreciate that also.
No, I'm just saying, like.
Oh, you right on, Jonathan.
Because
like,
conservatives are better at rhetoric. I think it's because conservatives, the Midwest has speech and debate classes. There's mandatory in many places. Texas, mandatory speech and debate classes. Iowa, they have a lot of speech and debate. A lot of these people who are Republicans who are really good at rhetoric come from places where that is part of really the curriculum all the way through. I think that.
Let me say this too, Jonathan, though, is maybe that's some of it. It's also like, here's what the rhetoric has always been. And so if you're saying something that people have heard their entire lives and therefore have no reason not to agree with it, of course it sounds better. When you are saying something that challenges what people fundamentally believe, which is more police will equal more safety, of course it's hard. So I do want to acknowledge, sure, maybe it is about the delivery and the rhetoric, but part of it is because we are asking people to imagine a way of getting to safety that is not what we have been told, again, since time immemorial.
Well, and I'm saying that's successful programming, right? It's programming that goes back to the fear of Black people. It's programming that goes all the way back to like slavery and
That's
birth
right.
of a nation.
That's right.
And Black people are rapists. They're going to rape your white woman, right? Like, so this is like rooted so deeply in America, right? It is so deeply rooted in America. Unless the rhetorical game is changed. And so I think it is, you're right. It is deeply rooted. But I'm saying that's the point. Yep. The point is why the original argument was just not hidden, right? It is because and would get pushback and would get you accused of being insensitive and not dealing with crime, is because you're not dealing with the thing that we all know is there from the beginning, right? If you're not dealing with the racist things that people are thinking up front, right? You're not preaching to enlightened liberals, right? You're not preaching to people who aren't so enlightened, right? Because all those people in New York vote Democrat, right? So you're not preaching to like the people who need to hear it, need to be put on the defensive for their beliefs. They're not put on the defensive, right? You're making the defensive arguments. If you're saying that doesn't work, that's a defensive argument, right? If you're saying you make the problem worse, that's an offensive argument. I think that
there you go.
I think that liberals have been and progressives have been making defensive arguments on crime, as opposed to offensive arguments that puts them on the defensive, as in, no, you are actually pro-crime and all the data supports that. You are so rooted in a racist past that you can't even see truth. You can't see data when it's in front of you. When people do peer-reviewed research at our university, like this research goes one way. There are no peer-reviewed articles that go the other way on this. None, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then talk to them about it is your perception of Black people and criminality that makes you blind. Now, if you're not having that conversation, they're not hearing it. And so, so part of it is just, and part of the passion is that, it is not about just persuading people who have already read the data and can process it. You've got to get past the racism and the anti-Blackness that's been there from the beginning.
Jonathan, you're making Malcolm the debater smile, little brother.
And here's the challenge, though. Let's be very, very honest. So the conversations that Joe and I are having, if you come in and you actually call it what it is, which is racism is behind the arguments to roll back bail reform, to put more people in jail and prison, you can't even begin the conversation in Trenton, because you know that starting with race, which is where this really starts and ends, is just a non-starter when it comes to the political conversation. So just recognize that while I absolutely hear you, where the sausage gets made, which is in the legislature on these things, it is very hard to have that honest conversation. We can have it here, is very hard to have in those, those hallways in the state house.
Here's the way.
That's a mouthful.
But we actually confront this exact issue within debate. Like, yes,
John, I just want to say, what she just said is absolutely correct, because that's what Leroy Jones told us, right? When he goes down in the legislature and tries to have that conversation, about that from a Black perspective, they don't want to hear that.
But it is not here, and here's the way to do it. That we found effective in terms of getting conservatives to vote that in ways that they wouldn't have voted before. Because like we have a often predominantly Black team, we're often Midwest, that kind of stuff. And one of the ways to do it is to ask the question, why aren't you going with the data? What is the reason behind it? Is it race? Is it because they're Black? Let them answer the question, right? But the data goes one way. Here's the thing that supports you, and the reason why you can have the question about race is because race is often the thing that explains the things that don't make sense. When you start off with the data in one way, and they're like, no, we're going to ignore the data, you have to ask, why are you ignoring the data? Data's on your side. They have to answer that question, right? If it's not race, then what is it, right? If there's been anything else, then why? The way to have questions about race is because often the data is in one side.
That's right.
Right? And so you force people to look at facts that are peer-reviewed, and these are legislators like, here's peer-reviewed evidence we have. What is the reason you're ignoring the evidence? And then once they ignore the evidence, then it could be like, well, many people will be like, it's because of race that you're ignoring actual evidence. What's the other reason? Give me a reason. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna be quiet. Why all the data goes one way? We know that it's going to disproportionately affect Black people. You're not doing it. Why? Crickets. Crickets. That's when they start crying. That's when they start turning red. Now, this is stuff that we've done, right? In terms of they turn red, they put their hands behind the face, some start crying, men start crying, women start crying, right? Like you're ignoring, here it is, right? Like, you know, I mean, yeah, there's some people who are just going to be crackerish, cracker. You're not going to get their votes, right? Like you will never get their votes no matter what you say. No matter what you say, you will never get their votes. So there's a certain amount that you will never get their votes. So if they say race, you shut down, right? They're never going to be up. A waste of time. But that's not the majority of white people, right? Like there are people who are hard right, and they were like, yeah, Black people in jail, I don't see the problem with it, right? Data schmata. I know I'm safer with them in jail, right? But the people that you're going to need, right, if it is possible, right, if the assumption is that you can have conversations with some people who will vote for this, those will be the people in the middle. And those are the people who are persuaded by evidence, right, and data. The question is, how do you get them to look at the data, right? So some people you're talking about, yeah, they're never going to talk to you, but they're never going to talk to you no matter what. Never. Right, You'll never get their vote. Never. I say of Chris Rock. When I say never, I mean never. No, you're never going to get their vote, right? But there is a segment in the middle that you need that could go one way, could go the other way. They're persuaded by evidence, and they need a little push. And when you have a conversation about race, and you ask them, well, we know this disproportionately affects Black people. They're all the data, 100%. Here's the way that you could be anti-crime in doing it. Here's the rhetoric where you can just really say you are the real crime solver because all the evidence goes one way, right? You are actually increasing crime. You just want to, like, there are institutions that benefit from crime. If you don't want to be part of that, you actually want to deal with this in the community, then follow the data. What, like, you hounding individuals on why aren't you? All the evidence goes one way. Here it is.
And they tell us that we have to
and it affects Black people
all the time. Whenever we try and do what we need to do for our community, we can't give you the money if we don't have the data to back it up. Always got the data, fella.
In debate, we would say because in debate, evidence are cards. We're like, you got the cards. The cards are fire, right? You got the evidence. The evidence is fire. So why aren't you actually paying attention when all the evidence goes one way? And let them answer the question.
Right. And this is one of those scenarios, right? Like sometimes when we do our work is focused on the legislature. We need to go convince the legislature of something. I don't really feel that that's where we're at with this, right? Like that's why this conversation is so important, and these type of conversations are so important, because what we really need to be doing is educating communities and having these conversations with people from the community. The state is not necessarily interested in doing that. They see a problem, they're going to try to address it as quickly as possible. But we need to be having these conversations with community members. That way they can attach, their lived experiences in the community to an understanding of some of the kind of legal systems or court systems that are involved in this, and really start to think and have conversations with their community members about how do we want to see this fixed, right? If everybody across the state of New Jersey was like, we want to incarcerate more people because there's an increase in violent crime, we could try to convince them, but that would not really be worth anybody's effort. But what we can do is make sure that folks are educated and they can have the conversation and start making sure that we are talking about it, right? And we are coming up with solutions. And it's not just the state is feeding us what the reality is going to be, and we have no say in it. So it's both parts are important, right? We need to be able to convince lawmakers, but we also need to be able to educate and have conversations with the community members. And that is more important, especially in this scenario, when we're talking about something that's going to have a really, really big impact on our Black communities. We don't want a scenario where folks see this change, and we have to come back 5 years from now and explain how it happened and that we missed our moment to really weigh in. So that's why these conversations are extremely important, because we can talk to the lawmakers and we can bang our head against the wall to try to get the lawmakers to listen to us, and we have strategies for those. But really, at the end of the day, if the community is not educated on the issue and aware of what's going on, then we aren't at our best. We aren't moving as a whole to try to get to a solution and a resolution that everybody agrees on. So we're kind of in a space now where we've been trying to say, state, slow down. Let's start talking to the communities that this is really going to impact. We see the data. We know what communities are going to be hit the hardest by this. So you cannot pass this type of legislation without reaching out to them first. So very appreciative of us being able to come on here and have this conversation, because it's very important that the community is aware of what's going on and that they have a very powerful voice in this. Right? You can be reaching out to Mayor Baraka and his staff. They've been very open to having conversations with us about this, and an openness to listen to folks and try to come to a resolution that everybody in the community agrees on. So folks out there, reach out to your community members, reach out to your friends, talk about this issue. See about
Joe. Let me. You're on a roll. I'm with you now. But we got this guy named Benji Wimberly in Patterson, who so sometimes he's not that embracing of being in conversations that are critical of what he's doing. All due respect to brother, right? How has the Patterson community responded to his trying to take this down that way we've already been, and we're trying not to go anymore?
Right. So to the best of my knowledge, the Patterson community has been active on this issue, right? And they are working through it and trying to make sure that their voices are heard, right? I understand that Assemblyman Wimberly is the sponsor of the bill. I understand that Mayor Sayej was one of the main kind of drivers of this bill, and that's why it's so important that folks are engaging. I know Black Lives Matter Patterson has been involved in the situation. I believe that the Patterson Healing Collective is getting up to speed and trying to be involved in this. So those are the type of efforts that need to happen, and they need to be happening in every community, especially the urban areas across the state, because without us weighing in, they're just going to go ahead and fast forward. So that a very good point, right? It's not just Newark. This isn't just a Newark issue. This is an issue of multiple communities across the state.
Right on. What I say, Joe, is that I definitely think y'all should put together. I don't know if you all know that Mayor Baraka, Mayor Lumumba, Sister Sanchez, and a number of other people are hosting the 50th anniversary National Black Political Convention in August with over 100 panels. I think that you guys should submit a panel just based around this, and then list the names of people who you think should be on that panel, and let's begin to reach out to those people and invite them to Newark in August to have that conversation very succinctly in our community. We're talking about some of the most dynamic panels because white folk are always saying, when things happen like George Floyd, that Black folk, we need to hear from you, right? We need to have this honest conversation. Well, Mayor Baraka is actually hosting that, right? Where everybody coming into that in here for those 4 days, right? We're not wearing titles. We don't give a damn who you are, but we're going to have this straight up Black conversation, right? And we're going to talk about
in the interest. And let me just jump in to add to you. And in the interest of building the united front that's necessary to halt the advance of the right wing in 2022. Absolutely. We need to be real clear about that.
Yep.
Right? Real intentional about that.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, Mayor Baraka has said his main focus is to pick up where his dad left off at. Right. So it's going to be real Black. It's going to be real strong, right? And we're going to try to have that kind of conversation, because it's not just local. We're talking about a national conversation and international conversation. Right? So
that's a perfect segue for Demo jumping in here.
And proposal.
Loaded segment, y'all. Jonathan, take them out. I know you just got big back in. Take them out. We got a demo ready, right?
All right.
Set him up talking about the 50th anniversary of Gary.
And Larry, you could start off. And two things. First, Insha, Joe, thank you for coming on. We very much appreciate the conversation. Thank you for letting me, vent a little bit and like have that I hope it was helpful. Right? But hopefully, for these conversations,
it's very objective.
But we
need to have these conversations. So thank you for letting us
turn them up.
That's right.
And we got to have you back on. To talk about these things. And yeah, you definitely should do the 2020. But before you go, Larry Hamm, I know you were listening in the background. You got any comments on bail reform, some of the conversation, or maybe you weren't, right? I don't know. I was just guessing.
Well, I heard a little bit of it. I didn't hear the whole discussion, but I think that there's a push from the right now. There was such a hard push in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. And people were really pushing hard for reform of the police and cutting police budgets under the slogan defund the police, and so on and so forth. That there's been this hard pushback from the right with an emphasis on crime and really trying to undo what little reform that has been done. And one of the things the right has targeted is bail reform. So they did step back a little bit in New York under the guise of tweaking or fixing bail reform. They actually rescinded certain elements of it, and they're trying to do the same thing here in New Jersey. So, I'm not really enthused about this attack on bail reform. I definitely don't agree with the line that crime is being caused by bail reform. I don't believe that. I don't think the evidence bears it out. Do we have a crime problem? Yes, but it's not because of bail reform. So that's my position on it.
Hey, John, I think you're muted.
And thank you so much. I had the honor, and I mean absolutely honor, to hear Larry Hamm talking this afternoon, Lawrence Hamm talking this afternoon. And we're going to get into that. And we're talking about Gary. Honored to know that you were at that 50 years ago. So thank you so much, Insha. Thank you so much, Joe Johnson.
You didn't ask him the question, Jonathan.
True. Question. Last question, very quickly. Who's your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group? Who are you rocking with now?
Happy to go first. So recently I've been listening to a lot of this guy named Vince Staples. He's a young mid to late 20s rapper from the West Coast. He dropped an album a few weeks ago called Ramona Park Broke My Heart. And it's all I've been listening to. So I definitely recommend everybody give it a spin.
All right.
Love that, Joe. Vince Staples is great. This is dating me, but Jay Dilla has always been my favorite hip hop artist and always will. I know.
All right. So yes, and that the one that got the awe, like Jay Dilla, rest in peace, because influential, awesome. Indeed. So thank you so much. We will have you back on, and we will talk. We will hopefully talk again soon.
Yes. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So man, I was honored, very honored, man, to hear you this afternoon at the student Gary conference, the model Gary conference for students. And it was just a great experience. There were kids from, the Essex County area that participated in a model Gary conference from 50 years ago, where they came together to talk about solutions to problems in the Black community. And the way it was, it just was great experience to be there, seeing all these children really having thoughtful really thoughtful solutions to problems, right? It was like, we need to understand that there are problems that we need solutions for. Can we identify problems that we all agree on? And then can we identify the solutions that need to be had? And that's what we will fight for. I think that model, that way of understanding, that stuff that's, that didn't start with Amiri Baraka, but Amiri Baraka was in the wonderful tradition of, in terms of how to solve problems within our community by massive grassroots organizing and coming together in conferences where we ask these questions, was just amazing. I learned so much. Apparently this has been going on since, I think it took the the 1800s, right? You know, like and you started
yes.
talking about that, like these conferences that actually led to movements it's just so much that was rich and thoughtful, and it was an inspirational experience. But and one of the things that made it, right, man, made it real inspiration. I have heard you speak. I have heard you. We've had many conversations with you, brother. This afternoon, you were on fire. Like,
Thank you, brother.
Like I'm like, I hope it was.
But you heard it all before, Jonathan. I don't know.
No, I heard it. Okay, so
Yeah. He had a building full of college students.
I didn't hear it all before.
He had he had a college flashback. That's what happened.
No, and I didn't hear it. Oh, right. I didn't hear it all before, right? There was some stuff you were putting out there that I hadn't heard before that you were saying, right?
Okay.
And the way that you were saying it, the context you were putting it in was so amazing. Can you just and if it's recorded, at some point we're gonna show it, right? Because if it's recorded, I know I'm gonna show it to my classes. I know I'm gonna show it to my debaters. What you were talking about very specifically about how to solve our problems as a community. The thing that you were talking about in terms of when that sister asked that brilliant question, she was like, "Small change. Do we do small change or small change bad, and we just do big change?" Right? We need fundamental institutional shifts. It's such a brilliant question from that kid, and you just, oh my goodness, it was amazing.
That says a lot about those students being well taught too. That's a hell of a question.
Man, those kids were brilliant. I couldn't believe. I thought they were college. The way the questions that they at the college level, they don't ask those questions. I mean, so either they were well prepared by their experience today, or they had good preparation with whatever teachers. I imagine some of those must have been T.J. Whitaker's kids, and then I know I discovered that some of them were Diane Colson's kids. So they getting it from somewhere, but they were absolutely brilliant today. I was totally impressed with their questions. I mean, very mature, serious, like adult questions, intellectual questions.
And that brought you back. And the reason why it was so amazing is that you talked about your relationship with the conference in Gary.
Right.
And Zaid, this is where you wanted to go with it as well, right? Like, can you talk to us about, like, what was Gary? How were you involved? What was, what was going on? Why was it important to you? How did you get involved in it?
Well, I think the first thing I would say about Gary is that my memories of Gary are through the eyes of an 18-year-old, who probably, if you had met him at that time, thought he knew everything, but in later years discovered he didn't know anything, So, I looked at Gary through the eyes of almost someone who was not politically experienced. So I was totally enthralled with Gary. But there are people who are still alive today who were at Gary, and some of them you've already had on the program, and perhaps others you might want to have. I don't know if you've had
rolling them out. Go ahead.
Right. I don't know if you've had Dr. Ron Daniels on the show.
Gotta get him. Try to track Ron down.
Right. Because Ron was at Gary in 72. He was with I believe the Ohio delegation.
Yes.
In 1972. And another person, I mean, I don't know if she's doing interviews or not, but is Amina Baraka.
Absolutely. She's she's ready.
I don't know if you had her on, but she definitely was at Gary and in the process leading up to Gary.
And she is passionate about us doing this anniversary convention on the very question of why it's important. In fact, what we got to do, I got to actually go over there and do the tech thing for us. So we got to work that out. But that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And we've been putting it off. I've been putting it off way too long. So absolutely.
Right. But I came to Gary. Fundamentally, I got to Gary because I was on the school board, right? Because I was, and I've told that story before. I'm not going to tell it again.
No, we need you to tell it because this is an audience that may not have heard it. Don't
Okay.
assume the audience knows where you're at.
Okay.
This afternoon, I heard some things for the first time, brother. You don't even know all the stuff that you forget to tell people. You've told us so much.
Right. Well, anyway, I didn't come from a political family. I didn't come from a family of activists. I had no direct political experience before my senior year in high school in 1971. And I say that as to distinguish myself from many of my peers who did. Like, there were students at Arts High School in 1970 who campaigned for Ken Gibson. I didn't know nothing. I didn't know that Newark had a black mayor until Ken Gibson showed up at the sit-in after we walked out of Arts High on March 27th, 1971. And he came there essentially to try to get us to end the sit-in, thinking that this might end up as a riot in the heart of the business district. But really, I was not in the political movement. Now, I did get some Black consciousness. Probably James Brown had a lot to do with it, because in 1967, he came out with that song, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud." And believe it or not, that song sparked discussions in Black households, because up to and past 1967, many Black people did not call themselves Black. They call themselves Negroes and they call themselves colored. And so when James Brown, of all people, because James Brown was not a political artist, James Brown was a get down and dance artist. You know, that's when you wanted dancing at a party, you put on James Brown. And James Brown's lyrics were rhythm and blues and dance music. And that didn't change until 1967. Now, what happened, you all probably know this story about how they actually called on James Brown to prevent a riot in a city where he was performing. And that night, it was announced that Dr. King had been assassinated, and the audience was about ready to run out the auditorium and tear up the city. And James Brown told him, don't do that. You know, there are other ways to make our power felt. So before he came out with that song, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud," he came out with a song about America, talking about how great America was. And a lot of the activists, and the person who first told me this story was Alombe Brad. Y'all remember Alombe from D12, Patrice Lumumba Coalition in New York? Alombe passed away.
AJazz back in that period.
Right. He had the AJazz models, which were in the forefront of the Black cultural movement. They were modeling dark-skinned people, because remember, the only models of Black people were light-skinned people. If you would have got a copy of Ebony or Jet or Sepia, y'all probably don't even remember Sepia. Sepia was Ebony's competition. And all the models was light skinned. And if there was a a cigarette ad, light skinned Black people. So Ilombe had the AJazz models, and they were all dark skinned and all had froze, and came with a whole Black cultural ethos. So a lot of these people Ilombe was among them, and they stepped to James Brown. And they said, why are you praising this racist country? So in response to that confrontation, James Brown came out with the song, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud." And that was one of the things that first brought me around to calling myself Black. I mean, I didn't even have an afro until my senior year in college, and you know how it was back then. People had New Nile and all kind of other Royal Crown, pomade, and people was putting in their hair to make their hair straight. So anyway, to make a long story short, there was the rebellion in 1967. Literally in the midst of that rebellion, There was a Black Power conference in Newark. It was downtown, right across the street. I think it was either in the Robert Treat or across from the Robert Treat Hotel. And that was amazing. I'm still amazed today. You know why? Because Newark was under martial law. It was under military occupation at the time of the Black Power conference. I'm still trying to understand how it happened, how they let all these militants in there. I think Stokely was there, Ron Karenga was there.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
and then that conference led to the Black Power Convention of 1968, which was held at West Kenny Junior High School in Newark. And then the following year, 1969, that's when they had the Black and Puerto Rican Convention, out of which came the quote unquote community choice team. Sharp James was on it. Gibson was for mayor. Sharp James was for South Ward Council. Dennis Westbrooks was for Central Ward Council. I even think that Tucker was on that ticket, but he didn't win. The only people who won were Earl Harris for at-large, Sharp James for South Ward, Westbrooks for Central Ward, and Gibson won. Now, Gibson was elected mayor, but he didn't get a majority Black city council until they were one short, and that one was really significant. They were one short, and they didn't get that one until 1974. So, you know, that was the prelude, the rebellion, and then these conventions and the Black Power cultural movement. So by the time I was a senior in high school, they had the Newark teachers strike. I was the president of the city government at that time. And I'm gonna tell you, I still wasn't, you know what who I was like? I don't know if y'all remember Archie comics. I was like a Black Archie. You know, I had the varsity letter, the varsity sweater. Like they really had those kind of sweaters where you had your high school varsity letter. If you were varsity in any kind of sport. I was the captain of the track team, the president of the student government, on and on and on. I wasn't talking anything about Black anything. And I passed Baraka's headquarters literally every day that I went to school. I took the number, what was the bus? The number 1, 16th Avenue bus. It let me off at that time it was called High Street. Now it's Martin Luther King and Springfield Avenue. And I literally had to walk past Baraka's headquarters every day going to and from school. And I never went in there. And then finally, because of the teacher strike in 71, the longest in the country, they told us if we missed 35 days of school, we wouldn't be able to graduate. If we didn't graduate, we couldn't go to college. Now, all of us had already applied to colleges, and some of us had been accepted already. And they came to me, the students came to me. They said, Larry, what are you going to do? I said, what you mean? What am I going to do? They say, you the president of student government. They talking about we not going to graduate. What are you going to do? And for the first time, I had to take up something serious with the student government beside the Halloween party and the UNICEF collection. And so we planned this walkout. A day before the walkout, somebody told Teresa David, who was the principal at Arts High at that time, she told me straight up, she said, Larry, if you take these kids out of school, you're going to be expelled, suspended, you're not going to graduate, and you're not going to go to college. But that was a day before, and it was too late to call it back. And so we were all scheduled to walk out at 10:43, which was the third period. I'm standing in front of the school. I'm already outside, standing in front of school. 10:44, nobody there. 10:45, tears coming out my eyes because I think I did something. I got my ass cooked now. But about 10:50, the doors came open, and damn near all the students in the school came out. About at least 90% of the students walked out, maybe more. And we marched down on the gateway, and there were about 400 of us in the march. The Gateway Hotel is now the Doubletree Hotel. It's the hotel right across the street from Penn Station. And we marched down on the hotel. That's where the board and the union were negotiating. And about 200 of us, about half of us got in before they realized what was happening. And we got up in the stairwell exits and we got on 2 of the floors and we took over 2 of the floors. And that's when Gibson came and he said that if you guys, leave, I will do everything I can to resolve the strike and get y'all back, on track. And so we ended the sit-in, and that was in March. And then in June, he sent his aide to my house. His name was a white guy from Boston, was his aide. His name was Pete Curtin. He came to my house on 12th Street. I was living on 12th Street between 16th and 18th Avenues, and asked me if I wanted to be on the Board of Education, and I accepted. And so I was sworn in on July 1st, 1971, the youngest, and I think I still hold that position as the youngest fully empowered voting school board member in the history of the country, because I was 17. I wasn't even 18. I wasn't even old enough to vote. So I was like, you know, a minor celebrity. And so Baraka took an interest in me, Amiri Baraka. He sent this brother named Cheo Majadi to meet me downtown and to arrange a meeting between us. Majadi is still alive, and I believe he's in Atlanta now. But Cheo Majadi came and he said, Imamu wants to meet with you. And so in August of 1971, we had our first meeting at the headquarters of C-Fund, Community for Unified Newark. And from that time, from that meeting on, we were close friends. And so Baraka wanted me to attend Gary. He said, at that time I was Larry. I didn't have an African name then. And he got me involved. He had people nominate me. Because see, what a lot of people don't know, there was like 10,000 people at Gary, but half the people were elected. Like the people who were voting were elected. They went through a whole convention process that started in 1971. There was a local Gary convention. You got elected out of the local to the county. You got elected out of the county to the state. The county convention was held at West Kenny Junior High School again. This was for Gary, Indiana. Now I remember this meeting. You know why I remember this meeting? Because Walter Fauntleroy came to that meeting. And it was the first time I heard somebody speak who could speak almost as good as Baraka. You know, as far as I was concerned.
Who Walter Fauntleroy, hold, let me stop you for a second. Tell everybody just for a second who Walter Fauntleroy was, because a lot of folks may not remember him.
Right. Walter Fauntleroy was the congressional representative from Washington, D.C., who did not have the right to vote. To this day, Washington, D.C. elects a congressperson. It's the sister now. What's the sister's name?
Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Yes, that's her name, Eleanor Holmes Norton. But it was Walter Fauntleroy then. And Walter Fauntleroy was very close to Baraka in those days because he came around periodically. Like it wasn't a one-off. Like Fauntleroy had been in Newark before the Gary effort and was back in Newark after the Gary. But he was at the county convention, which was also held. And it was the first time I'd ever heard a person give a speech and then sing a song at the end of the speech. He sang, and he could sing. He sang a cappella, The Impossible Dream. You know that song, I dream to dream, the impossible dream. You know that song about, it was from the play, right? The Broadway play.
Dream,
Don
the
Quixote.
impossible dream.
That's it. That's it. To fight the unbeatable foe.
Yeah.
And he said he had people standing on their seats because he had given this speech about how important Gary was for Black Power and how, you know, all the odds were against us. But even though it seemed like an impossible task, we could do this. And man, he had people standing on their seats in tears, singing that song. And you know, that ain't even like a Black song, but he was singing it. He put the Black fusion into it. You know? That's right. And so we were elected out of the county convention to the state convention, which was held in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And then the people who were to go to Gary were elected out of the state convention. So you were literally elected up to go to Gary. And I was elected. I was part of the delegation. And there's actually online a copy of Unity and Struggle, which was the Black newspaper of the Committee for a Unified Newark, that actually has a picture of the New Jersey delegation to Gary. It's online. You can look at it. of the Jersey delegation to Gary before we went. And so we went to Gary. Now, one of the things about Gary, one of the things I mentioned today was that when I was on the school board, you know, if you can look this up actually online, you know, there's not a lot of stuff online that goes that far back. We talking about 50 years, but this is online for some reason. You know, there was we were in the Black Power movement, so a lot of kids had the red, black, and green flag, and they were being thrown out of school. I mean, think about this. But now, see, 10 years ago, I told you this story. You said, that's crazy. But now, with this attack on Black studies, masked as an attack on critical race theory, you can see it. So students were bringing the red, black, and green flag to school, and they were being put out of class. They were being thrown out of school. So I put a resolution forward, said that the red, black, and green flag, the Pan-African flag of Garvey, should be used as a teaching tool in classrooms, and students should be permitted. Man, the day after, now the board ratified the motion. They voted for it. 5 members of the board voted for it. Of course, the white members, John Servais and Dr. Petty from the East Ward, and Servais was from the North Ward. And I was trying to think, and there was another guy, I can't remember his name. You know, it basically broke down black and white. The black people voted for it, the whites didn't. Maybe one of the white people did, I'm not sure. Man, the next day, they were blasting me on television. I came home one day because, you know, I don't know if they do this anymore, but they used to have stories on television like Search for Tomorrow, Edge of Night, The Quiet Storm. You know, my mother used to watch these stories. I came home one day, my mother was watching the stories, and in the middle of her stories on ABC, the vice president of public affairs broke into the TV show to give an editorial from ABC denouncing me. The black militant, separatist, black nationalist, radical, black student on the Board of Education was ruining Newark students by replacing, hey, they got it all wrong. Ain't nobody said nothing about replacing the American flag, but this is how they played it, that he was replacing the American. Baraka told me that he was all the way in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. He said he heard about it in Tanzania. It's like the shot heard around the world, you know. And so I was under attack for weeks for the Black Liberation Flag. And you just Google Lawrence Hamm Black Liberation Flag. They actually have articles online from like Time Magazine and the New York Times.
Yeah, they're
on that. So you know, and when the attacks came, I really didn't have no cover. The only one who would defend me, 2 people. There was 2 people who would defend me. One was Jesse Jacob. He had been the black president of the Newark Board of Education during the teachers' strike. And he was my ally from the day I was appointed. He was like, brother, I'm paraphrasing now, but he was like, brother, I got your back. Don't worry. I got you. It was him and Amiri Baraka. They defended me because they were relentlessly attacked in the Star Ledger, in the New York Times, on ABC, on NBC, on CBS. I mean, these people thought that the Black Liberation Flag thing somehow was going to start a revolution. So I was very despondent at the time that I went to Gary because I had been under such attack. When I got off the plane in Gary and we got in the taxi cab, and there was like this boulevard, once we got off the highway, there was this boulevard that went straight to West Side High School, where the Gary Convention was being held. Richard Hatcher, who was the black mayor of Gary, Indiana, who had actually been elected before King Gibson. Richard Hatcher had red, black, and green flags hanging from every street lamp, all 2 miles down that boulevard. I cried because all these other elected officials was denouncing me, man. And it wasn't just the white racists. It was some of the black people, some of them that you love today. You know, they was denounced the black militant. The favorite thing was I was a puppet. I was Amiri Baraka's puppet. That Amiri Baraka had really engineered this, and I was just like, it was like a Charlie McCarthy kind of act, you know. Baraka had nothing to do with it. It was the students. They came to the board meeting. They said, we get thrown out of school because we bring the black green flag. It was spontaneous right there. I said, I moved it. They had permission to bring the red, black, and green flag in school. Blah, 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 blah. It got passed. But this is how they did me, you know. And when I saw these red, black, and green flags, now this is in 1972. You know, today you see all kind of banners hanging from street lamp. Nobody did that back then. Dick Hatcher, red, black, and green flags on every street lamp. And it brought tears to my eyes. And when I got to Gary, when I got in the convention, I had my family. They were not in any black organizations, you know, none of that. I had never been to anybody's convention before, and thousands of black people conducting themselves like a government, like they were hammering out like the law, you know, like Moses, you know, the black, we shall support self-determination statehood for Washington, D.C. You know, that was one of the key planks of Gary, because to this day, April 29th, 2021, black people in Washington, D.C. do not have a voting representative in the Congress of the United States. That's right. Eleanor Holmes Norton can vote in committee, but she cannot vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. That was the first plank. Huh?
If you go into DC, you will see a lot of logos that say taxation without representation.
Yes,
that's the constant logo. Yeah,
DC is virtually
people got bumper stickers. By the time, if it ever happens, you see what the game is. They trying to gentrify DC. So if DC ever gets statehood, it's not going to be a black state. That's really what's behind the gentrification. Because remember, if DC gets statehood, it's going to get a governor, it's going to get a House of Representatives member, and it's going to get two U.S. senators.
That's right.
And that was that if you go right now and you Google National Black Political Agenda, in the introduction to the official introduction to the agenda, I'm not talking about anybody's narrative. In the official introduction to the agenda, they lay out about 5 or 6 key things. Like, you got this whole agenda that's 100 pages, but they lay out 6 or 7 key things. One of them was statehood for DC. You know what the other one was? National health insurance. That's right. That came out of Gary.
That's right.
50 years ago. We're talking about Medicare for all. 50 years ago.
That's right.
Black people voted for national health insurance. You know what the other thing was? Increase the minimum wage. And you know what it says in the agenda? To increase the minimum wage from $2
Did he freeze?
Hour. And we still fighting for that.
He's got all right.
Do you know this? I'm talking about guaranteed minimum income in the last presidential election. King was talking about it in '66. It was in, not only was it in the platform, it was in the 7 things that were highlighted before the platform. So, you know, I thought I was in black heaven. I never seen black people. I came out from Ridgewood Avenue. Y'all don't know my story. I lived in a cold water flat. You know what a cold water flat is? That's when 25% of the houses in Newark didn't even have running hot water.
Right.
When I lived on Ridgewood and Avon from 1953 to 1957, I lived in a cold water flat.
What I saw, I lived right next to the Ridgewood Bar. It's not even there no more. The Ridgewood Bar on the corner of Avon Avenue and Ridgewood. I come out my house, not just on Fridays and Saturdays. I lived in a brick tenement building, maybe 6 families. I come out the house in the morning, drunk people on the stoop, dope addicts on the stoop. You had to step over people. I had never seen Black people come together in unity. I constantly heard when I was coming up as a kid, oh, Negroes can't get together. Negroes can't do nothing together. You know, I used to hear that all the time from people in my family and people in the neighborhood, the neighbors next door and everything. We just can't get together. And here I was at Gary, looking at Black people like they are government. I had never seen nothing like this before. And our champion from New Jersey, our champion, the one that was up there leading the whole thing, was Amiri Baraka, Imamu Amiri Baraka.
That's right. That's right.
Man, I kept tears in my eyes.
That's right.
Larry.
I left it. Wait a minute, Donna.
Okay.
I knew I was with the right man. Because he wasn't just trying to ham out something for this section or that section, this religion or that religion. He was trying to put together something for the whole Black nation.
That's right.
And it was after Gary that I asked Baraka to give me an African name. I asked him as soon as we got back from Gary, it must have been like around March 13, 14, 15, something like that. I asked Amiri, I said, I want an African name. Now that might not sound like anything.
Tell him what the African name is and what it means.
Well, I asked him for a name, and it took him 30 days because the tradition was that they're supposed to name you according to your characteristics.
Right.
And I asked him for a name when we got back from Gary, and it was like the end of March, beginning of April. He gave me a little envelope. He had somebody deliver it to me with a demo on the envelope. No, it was Larry. It was on the envelope. And I opened it up, and it said, Adimu Chunga, exalted youth. You know, I'm sorry, Donna. Go ahead. I cut you off. Go ahead. You was trying to. I was just in the moment.
Don't be sorry. Exalted. So he spoke your future into existence. How old were you again? Just for people who were just coming on, how old were you again at the time?
I was 18. I was 18 years old.
Now I want to go back because you said that you went by to visit Amiri, and you said from that day on, you guys became friends.
Yes.
I would have characterized it as a mentor. He was your mentor. So real
definitely. Definitely.
But what is the age difference? Are you guys close in age?
Well, let me see. He was 78 when he died. He died in 14. So that would be how many? 8 years ago. So if he was 78, I was 60. So there were 18 years. There's 18 years between us.
So yeah,
There's
so that's all. So he's an adult. But you didn't say he was my mentor. He was somebody leading me. You immediately said he was my friend. Now I want to ask you, and especially for our community, you know, how many times do you have situations where an elder of the community calls a youth in and become their mentor today? How many times do we see that? Because that is very important. Not was very important. It is very important. So how often do we see? And have you had the opportunity to do the same, to find a young person and mentor them, also almost making a mini me?
I did actually have a young brother that I tried to mentor when I was on the board of ed.
I actually saw in him leadership qualities and characteristics. And I actually gave him an African name. I gave him the name Kiongozi Chunga. And his name was Michael Hyder. But he's since passed away. But when I was on the school board, we had an organization called the Newark Student Federation. After Imamu's way of saying Newark, that's the actual way Newark was named. It wasn't Newark, it was Newark, because the people who founded the colony were very religious, But Imamu kind of popularized. I think he had a poem where he said, "We're going to change the slave ship into a new ark."
That's right. New covenant. That's right.
We're going to change the slave ship into a new ark. But from that day in August of '71, he was my hero. I mean, the truth is that I tried to be like him. I tried to speak like him. I tried to act like him. I really saw him as a model of revolutionary leadership. And I believed at that time, that he was trying to make a revolutionary movement in this country.
Chairman, let me just say, as we begin to transition into our next segment, with DJ Rhino, what's going on hip hop? Mike, I wanted to make sure who's controlling the John, we can watch the cameras. Okay. As we begin to transition, and DJ Rhino is with us. DJ Rhino, did you happen to hear any of some of the things that Larry just said at the? Did you hear any of Larry's discussion?
I actually just came in just a few minutes. I was just picking up my daughter and dropping off her friends and stuff like that. So I kind of worked the last 5-10 minutes.
Let me say this. Hold on, Don.
Let me just.
I want to shout out DJ Rhino's wife, Da, because she is working hard. Putting in some serious work on building out what the 50th anniversary convention is looking like. And she's had a little medical issue. So Rhino's doing double duty too as a dad and as a husband. So we all wanted to acknowledge that. Right, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Sure.
So DJ Rhino, keeping your wife in prayer. I want to Rhino. When I came on, because I came on not too long ago, Chairman said that he went to Amiri Baraka's office and he met him, and from that moment, he became his friend. I thought mentor, but he said he didn't use that word. He said friend. And you working around, you're a DJ, you're possibly a mentor. You are a mentor to your daughter. Your daughter's a DJ, so that's a mentor relationship. You know enough about Chairman. Can you tell me how important it is that for our young people, mentorship, how important is mentorship, do you believe, even in the hip-hop community? Can you speak a little to that?
Mentorship is real important, especially for our community when, unfortunately, a lot of us come from broken homes and things like that. A lot of us are missing fathers and things like that. You know what I mean? So it's always good to have like a big brother or some type of a mentor that can guide you. You know what I mean? Again, especially in our community. It's for everybody, but especially people who come from those situations, those conditions. You know what I'm saying? Having a mentor in your life is definitely useful. It's definitely helpful. And they do become friends and family to you. You know what I'm saying? If they really put that type of time in, you know what I mean? They do become family and close friends because, like Larry said, he wanted to talk like him, and it's like that when you deal with a mentor or somebody that you really look up to. You kind of do that, man. You kind of follow in their mannerisms, even. You know what I mean? Look at how the Nation of Islam has been. Look how Farrakhan and Malcolm and the way even brother Hot, you know what I'm saying, the way they carry themselves, you know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
all mentorship, you know what I'm saying? That's all mentorship. It's like a chain, you know what I mean? So yeah, no, it's super important in hip hop and in every other aspect of our lives. It's definitely important to have some type of role model, you know what I mean, to reflect on.
And
Let me
You know,
ask
Rhino,
I don't know.
as you,
I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know if you guys know this, but Amiri Baraka married me and my first wife.
Wow.
He see they had several organizations. They had
Your sound is going
the
off
Committee
again.
for Unified Newark. They had now Committee for Unified Newark was a member of the national organization Congress of African People, but they also had something called Kawhida Temple. And in Kawhida, see, Imamu wasn't just a name. Imamu was a
He was indeed the leader.
Right.
And all the brothers and sisters had rank in the organization. And there were 4 Imamus in the country. I think I can't name them all now. I used to be able to name them. There was Imamu Sakumu, Imamu Alisi, Imamu Baraka, and I can't remember the 4th one. And at the top was Maulana Karenga. He was at the top. So an Imamu could marry people. And Imamu married me and my first wife, whose African name I had given her, Kipenzi. Now, all my children have legal African names. Our African names were assumed and we never legally changed them. But my daughters are named Laini and Imani and Nia because of the influence of Amiri Baraka and the Kawhida doctrine, the Kawhida ideology. Let me tell you, me and Baraka was so close at one point. He gave me one of his suits. Like, we had an African wedding. I don't know if y'all remember that movie 5 on the Black Hand's Eye. Did y'all ever see that? 5
Yeah.
We had an African wedding just like that.
Wow.
And Baraka had 2 headquarters. He had 502 High Street, which is where St. Benedict's is, where the relatively new gymnasium is, next to St. Benedict's Prep on the corner of High and Martin Luther King. That's where 502 was, and his bookstore. He had a bookstore now, House of Cooperative Economics, but he had another headquarters on Belmont Avenue, 13 Belmont Avenue, which was Hikalu in Mwalimu, which meant House of the Teacher, and that's where our wedding was. Me and my first wife. And Baraka, I didn't have an African dress suit. You know, y'all ever see Julius Nyeri, how Julius Nyeri is dressed? He got that suit with no collar on it. You ever see that, Julius? Well, Baraka had one of those suits. I didn't have no African dress suit.
It's known as a naval collar. Your mic is off a little bit, Ademo.
And
okay.
And we also want to
hear me now.
But we also want to bring Rhino in to. I know that Larry, we love you. We need you. We need these stories, right?
And right there, Jonathan, stay right there, because Linda Carter said, Larry, hurry up and write your life story for future generations to read and learn.
It's coming out.
Okay,
yep.
So
yep.
All right, so
but I want to make this transition to like Larry, stay, because you're always great for these sessions.
Well, Larry, let me tell you. Can I tell Larry something real quick? Larry, you know, a couple of weeks ago, you hear my mic?
Go mic, Rhino. Yeah, go.
Oh,
no,
I was gonna say, Larry, a couple of weeks ago, my mom was out there with you with POP at one of the marches that y'all was doing, man. So you got her amped up too, man.
You talking about April 4th? She was there on April 4th. On April 4th.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
She was on April 4th.
Yes, that was the last demonstration.
Yeah, yep, she was there.
Yeah. All right, well, tell I said thank you for coming. Tell I said thank you for coming.
Definitely would have addressed her.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Okay. And you're welcome to stay. And as we transition into hip hop, into what's the state of hip hop, Rhino and Larry was talking about the convention. And is there anything that you want to ask in his closing, or is there anything that you want to say? And Larry, as Jonathan said, please stay.
Well, here's
so Rhino, what do you want to do? Go ahead, it's you, Rhino.
I mean, I don't have any questions about the convention. I do have other questions about possible fundraisers prior to that, but I would want to speak off camera about that first, though.
The thing that we want to
Right.
get from you before we end the show, to be sure, because we brought you on to talk about Gary, and we're going to start bringing folks on other folks who have been through Gary, you know, as a part of our oral history project for the convention, right? Why was Gary important in 72, and why is the anniversary convention important in 2022? Just make it plain.
And make it in a hip hop fashion.
Right,
Related to hip hop.
We're gonna have Larry back, and we I hate running over time. It's almost 9 o'clock. Like,
I got you.
Now I'm gonna squeeze 30 minutes into 10.
Right, like so let Rhino take over this part, man. Give it to Rhino.
Yo, well, I mean, right now, I mean, being that it's short time, I'm just gonna give out the some shout outs. I'm not gonna get too deep. I'll just give out some greetings and love. 2 days ago, April 27th, 1999, Naughty by Nature put out 1999, Nature's Fury. That was released on April 27th, 1999. So I just want to say happy anniversary to that album.
So is that you down with OPP?
Yeah. No. This was like their fifth album. It was like their fifth album. This was in 99 because they came out in like early 90s.
Gotcha.
Also want to give a shout out to my brother, my man, Cool Mellow Max 165. He's one of the OGs, one of the first dudes who we thought was gonna blow from Boom Squad. You know, he was like our method man, and he just had a birthday yesterday, so I gotta give him mad love. Big ups to Cool Mellow Max. Also yesterday, in 1998, Big Pun had put out his debut album, Capital Punishment. That was I'm not a player, and a whole bunch of other joints. Yeah, that was a huge breakout for him. You know what I mean? That debut album. Also, and it's not hip hop, but it's hip hop related because we respect our leaders. We respect those who stand up for the right thing, man. Also, yesterday, 1967, the heavyweight boxing champion
Muhammad Ali. Say,
yes.
Hell no, I ain't going.
Hell no, I ain't going.
That's right.
That's right. And so he refused to be inducted into the U.S. Army, and in result of that, they took his title away from him. He ended up being incarcerated, and it was a whole big thing behind that. But we love him for not just his sportsmanship, but for his humanity and standing up for what was just right. It just made sense. You know what I'm saying? He was talking about, you want me to go over there and kill folks over there when you doing me the same way over here. Why would I go? You know what I mean? That was his take on it. So
what did he say? Big Con, the Big Cons didn't do
Big
nothing
Con,
to me.
Yeah.
They didn't do nothing to me.
Ain't never called me the N-word. My fight is here with you. That's what he said.
That's right.
He said, I'm willing to face machine gun fire and a firing squad if I must, wearing an FOI uniform if I have to stand up for my religious beliefs. That's what he said. And and not only was his title taken from him, but for all of his athletic greatness, we have never saw Muhammad Ali in his prime. He was the greatest inside the ring, being denied a prime and being a transcendent figure on the stage of history, the most famous man in the world for that stand, right? Standing up for peace, world peace, and standing up for the dignity and self-determination of our people, and paid the price for it. That's why he's the greatest of all time.
Right, the greatest of all time. All right, so also today is the anniversary. We lost brother Steezo from Connecticut, the rapper Steezo from Connecticut. We lost him 2 years ago, 2020 on this day. So we just want to say rest in peace and condolences to his family. Continuous love and condolences to the family of Steezo out of Connecticut. Also today is the anniversary of Houdini's third album, Back in Black. Oh man, which had funky beat, One Love. This was like a huge album for them. This is when they got to like real commercial status. You know what I mean? This was their third album, 1986 on this day. Houdini.
That was 86. Wow.
Yeah, 86, man. And that was such a huge, that album was such a huge hit because they had songs that can go in any direction. That's right. They had stuff for everybody. You know what I mean? And it was all love. It was all just good music. You know what I mean? Rest in peace, Larry Smith, who was their producer at that time. You know, he just knew how to bring the music, man. He just knew how to get their sounds right, man. So rest in peace to Larry Smith, and rest in peace to Ecstasy, aka John Fletcher from Houdini. We lost him also 2 years ago.
2 years ago,
yeah. Also today, so this is the last one. Today is also the birthday of Master P, coming out of New Orleans. You know, it's funny.
New Orleans. Yeah.
New Orleans.
Master P.
Yes.
Is the unsung hero.
Percy Miller.
Master P is the unsung hero of the Million Youth March. Everybody know about the Million Man March, the Million Woman March, right? But I took 60 people to the Million Youth March, right? The Million Youth March. He dropped. I'm not going to disclose the amount of money, but he dropped a significant amount of money at the last minute because the police were trying to prevent us from staging the rally, and that's what it was. From staging the rally in New York City at the last minute, and came under fire for having made that donation from the state, i.e. through taxes and all that, because that's how they want to come at you if you got you some money and it's legit, and they don't want you to do nothing with it for your people. Right? He is the unsung hero of the Million Youth March back in September of 95. So I wanted to give you a shout at him. I don't want to shout out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that because I didn't know that. So big ups to Percy Miller, aka Master P. Also, you know, I had a story about, you know, back in '96, when I was trying to shop some music of my own. I went to Def Jam. I had a meeting with a brother named Bimmy at Def Jam back in '96. Went up to his office. I was trying to shop these two songs. I had a song called Loose, and I had another one called The Recipe. So I was trying to shop these two songs, like the A side and the B side. So we're sitting in his office, in Bimmy's office.
And just for education point, what does shop a song mean? You were trying to put the song out?
Trying to get a deal, basically. Trying to see if I can get a deal, like a single deal or something. You know what I mean? So I went there with the two songs. I'm sitting there in Bimmy's office. Bimmy's digging the songs. You know, he's pointing out parts and stuff that he likes. You know, he's digging the beats and all of that. But he kept being he was still transfixed on this screen. He had like this TV screen in front of his desk, right? And on the wall. And he kept looking up there, and people kept coming into the office and, you know, looking at this movie and saying, "Oh, you got it too, yeah? Yo, it's crazy." You know, there's all this talk about this movie that he had playing and the music to this movie that he had playing. And the movie was Bout It. And that was the independent movie that Master P had just put out when he was coming out. And he also had the album that went along with it. So it was almost like a soundtrack to the movie. So I'm sitting there and I'm just seeing Bimmy and all of these people going back and forth, in and out, you know, talking about this guy, right? So I'm like, who is this dude? You know, I'm like, who is this country hustler dude with the moan? You know what I'm saying? So, you know, but then, you know, years later, I'm looking back like, wow, that was basically, I was sitting there basically watching Def Jam go crazy and what they were trying to do was they were trying to sign Master P to Def Jam. You know what I'm saying? And they ended up doing it. I mean, I'm sure it was probably knowing Master P's business, it was probably some type of a distribution deal or something like that. But yeah, so it just bugged me out that this was the time that they were actually putting Master P on, and this is why we heard Master P on the song 4321 by LL Cool J featuring Method Man, Redman, DMX, and Cannabis. Master P was also on that song. So you know, some people wonder, like, how did he get down with them? Like, he was on Def Jam, and that's how that happened. So, but I was there when all of that was brewing up. So that was just my little story on that.
DJ Rhino, did you happen to see the new Essence? The cover of Essence has Cardi B and her husband's name is Offset.
Yeah, Offset.
Yeah. Did you see the cover of Essence this month?
No, I didn't see the cover, but I did see a clip. I did see a clip. I saw a clip going on where she was like on the red carpet and they're taking pictures. And Offset, it was a clip of Offset standing in front of her, like fixing her hair, making sure everything was nice. And then he stood to the side and let them take the pictures. And that was like kind of cool. Everybody was like, yo, that's cool. That's the kind of relationship people want. You know what I'm saying? Where, you know, you take care of you, no matter the status, you know what I'm saying? You still want to see that kind of love.
Queen is a queen. You got to take it care and honor your.
And I asked you that. So can we for next week? Can you make sure you grab the Essence? I think that's so big because you know our Essence and Ebony covers, Essence covers, Ebony covers, Jet magazine covers. You know, there's something special those magazines. But when I grabbed that and seeing them on the cover of the magazine. It was everything, so I would love to talk about that. And it has all the children, so they have a blended family. I guess he had children, she had children, and then they had children together. So
that's positive. That's positive. For Essence to do that was mad dope because that's not just showing Black love, which is definitely needed, but it shows Black love in hip hop. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
real Black love, family, you know what I'm saying, in hip hop, and And it continues. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen it before. You know, we saw J and B, and you know, we've seen it, but it's just good to keep seeing it and to see the younger rappers doing the same thing.
It's important to be seen.
And Rhino, also, you know, I sent you Queen Latifah was in the neighborhood putting a shovel in the ground for the new building she's building.
We wasn't gonna get off the air without mentioning that.
That was a beautiful thing to see, man. I'm glad she's doing what she's doing.
I would love to get
because there was a lot of people. There was still some people that were, you know, there's always talk. There was like, you know, they were, she left Newark, she ain't doing it, you know, she ain't doing nothing for the hood or whatever. But nah, she's got a heart. I always felt like Latifah always had a heart. You just got to give her the right time to make the right move.
No, can I just say something that people, if we can put,
I'll push back on that. Go ahead, Don.
Whoever's working the cameras, if we can go to make sure everybody's being shown. But one thing Queen Latifah did, if you go to every Queen Latifah movie, probably all of her movies, or most of them, are shot in Newark. All of them were shot in New Jersey. There's something in New Jersey, and it's funny because Ed mentioned to me that there's a theater in Journal Square, and he said that she shot a movie out of that theater in Journal Square. But I love to look at her movies because I always can catch glimpses of, something that's Newark. That's Newark, and you'll see it. She put, and just with the last project that she just, the remake of the series she had, that was shot in Newark and Jersey City in New York. So people can't get that one on. Queen brings the money to Jersey. She brings the money to Jersey. Yeah, and that's very important because when you're bringing those
equalizer, she's killing it. I love
the equalizer. When you're bringing those dollars, when you're shooting production and bringing those dollars into a town, everybody from the deli on the corner to all the way up to the stars make money because people got to eat. We have to understand that. So. I know.
Big ups to all our Brick City rappers, man. Big ups to Latifah. Big ups to Artifacts. I just had them all on. Of course, Do It All. You know what I'm saying?
You gotta have the laws. You gotta shout out the laws. You just had them all.
Yeah, man. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, big ups to all of them, man. You know,
and I know that,
man. You know, they always represent Newark. Always in their own way, they always represent Newark and the life in Newark.
Now, can we have a sit-in and can we protest Jonathan? Can we have a sit-in on Jonathan?
Right, because like, oh, I'm just saying.
Jonathan's on fire today. I don't know if you want to mess with him
But
today.
I'm just saying, like, I've been here since 6, so I ain't come
All
late.
right. Oh, here we go.
I can leave on time because I ain't come late.
I'm on double duty. I gotta make dinner.
All right, so
I gotta go
So
make
let's
dinner.
wrap it up.
It's gonna be a late
Okay,
dinner.
you got that. All right. So you had
but definitely
announcements. Announcements.
Okay, so let's do the announcement very quick so we can, because I was about to wrap it up, let Larry Hamm and thank him for coming on and everyone else coming on, but let's do some announcements because I mean,
all right, real quick. Let me just get mine out real quick. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Twitch.tv/Rhino CMZ.
Ride.
I'm going in for the shake up with CMZ at 3.
Shake up.
That's it.
Every Saturday, 3 o'clock.
Chairman,
Donna?
Chairman, any announcements? Any announcements? Zaid, any
Yes,
announcements?
we're gonna be in Newton tomorrow. We have a birthday vigil for Major Gulia Dale III, a career veteran, decorated soldier who was tragically killed on the 4th of July, right? In a mental health crisis in Newton, New Jersey. We're gonna be out there at 12 o'clock tomorrow, honoring that man. It would have been his 62nd birthday. He was the 4th of July. It was just a few months ago when we lost that brother. It was horrible where we lost that brother. We're gonna be out there tomorrow.
So I just want to say that there are several events going on around in the state for Earth Day events, and I know there's one in Jersey City. And Google New Jersey Earth Day events, and I want everybody to remember, effective May 4th, when you go into the store, they can't give you a plastic or paper bag anymore.
Bring your own damn bag. That's right.
Bring your bag with you. So use this opportunity. You got to keep a bag. And Jonathan, we haven't talked about that legislation, so we probably need to talk about that legislation because it goes into effect. So they will have bags for you to purchase, but bags are not going to be given because this is about the environment, and particularly the plastic bags, protecting the environment. So effective May 4th, when you go into a store, either you bring your bag with you or you're going to be holding everything in your hand.
In your hand, that's right.
Yeah.
Dropping them and falling, and people going to be robbing you and all of that. We're going to laugh. No, I'm kidding.
All right, so we do have to have a conversation about that, but we have the announcements, and thank all our guests, the West Ward Council people, the West Ward Council candidates who came on. So for shout out to Dupre Kelly and Lyndon Lyndon. Oh man, it's funny because like I'm getting old and I'm always trying to say Lyndon Johnson, but it's not. I know that.
It's not Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon, you're gonna help me out. Oh wow, you just left me hanging. That's cold, man. You're just leaving me hanging over here. And
nobody remember it.
While I try to.
Lyndon has been out here forever. Lyndon has been long.
Right, yeah, and I known him forever, right? So this is just one of those.
He's been out here for long.
Yes, very much, and I've known him for years, since before the Cami Anderson stuff, because Lyndon Brown, right? Mm-hmm. And always have thank him for coming on. Thank our guests from the Vera Institute and the ACLU for a lively discussion. I like how that ran together, and of course, thank you, really sincere thank you to Chairman Lawrence Hamm. I was inspired. I was really inspired by your speech, right? I know it wasn't directed at me; it was directed at kids, but I was like, damn, right? Because maybe because I've never heard you actually give a speech. We've always just talked. And maybe I've just never been in the audience for a speech that you gave like that. But now I understand. Okay, I understand, right? So I always understood, but now I understand. So thank you.
And I'm sorry, Jonathan, Chairman. The event that happened today, can people go back and watch it? Is it on YouTube or somewhere?
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask the organizers, but
okay, gotcha.
Seton Hall hosted it, so we got to figure out how they documented it like that.
Right. So
right.
So but thank you so much for coming on. Very much appreciate it. And was inspired by you today. So thank you very much. At the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And thank you for coming on after on just a short notice as well. Right so on. Much appreciated, man. Much appreciated. All right. So that's all politics the local for this week. Donna, you want the last word?
Number one.
All right.
I think that's
all
what
right.
she's saying.
She behaved herself. My God.
Sounds good. All right. Talk to you later.
All right, y'all. Peace.
All right. Peace.
You don't stop.